Back in 2007, I was living in a university town in Michigan, Ann Arbor, about 45 minutes out of Detroit. And one of the great things with living in a state like Michigan is that there's plenty of options if you're interested in sports. So even though most of the time you were spending time in the university town, but when the Detroit Tigers, the baseball team, played, there was really a reason to go to Detroit. So I was sharing a flat with a friend, Pete, who was super smart, PhD in organic chemistry, but he never refilled the gas tank of the car that we shared. So I was running a little bit late to this baseball game in Detroit. I was jumping into the car and drove to Detroit, not noticing that the car actually had no gas in it. So getting closer to Detroit, I actually realized that I'm going to run out of gas in the middle of the freeway. So I took the first exit I could and tried to enter Detroit just to find a gas station. I did find a gas station. This was before, GPS was included in every phone. That same year, in 2007, was the release of the first iPhone. But still, I had no access to a GPS. So I was driving around Detroit to try to find gas. Finally, I did. The problem was, though, that this gas station was in an area of Detroit that I didn't realize was really, really dangerous. So even though it was in the middle of the day, when I was getting out of the car, I was stopped by a police officer. "Sir, what are you doing here? It doesn't look like you come from here." And as a naive Swede, even though I'd been living there for quite some time, you live in a bubble if you live in a university town outside of a city like Detroit. You go in, you go out. You go and watch the baseball game. You go and attend a concert, but you don't really realize, as an outsider, the situation that is dominating the landscape. The police officer was watching me when I was refilling the car with gas. And I remember the feeling getting back into the car, thinking that the US is great. That's why I came here. I want to learn how to design policies that promote growth, innovation, tech. That's why I came here. It's a wonderful country. It's a great culture. The people are great. But we, Sweden, can never end up in a situation where it's too dangerous to go outside of the car to refill the gas tank in a major city. At that time, Stockholm was crowned one of the safest capitals globally. A lot has happened since then. A lot has happened. Sweden is still a great country. I believe in Stockholm. The Stockholm Chamber of Commerce has been around for 120 years. The Stockholm Chamber of Commerce is the oldest chamber of commerce in all of Scandinavia. In fact, in all of the Nordic region. We've been around for 120 years to tirelessly work to improve the business climate. We have never had to focus on crime or safety. That's not been on the top agenda of the business community here in Stockholm or in Sweden. But now it is. Now it is. For individuals and businesses alike, this is one of the most pressing issues. And when we look at our vision for Stockholm, we believe that in order to become the greatest capital in Europe, we have to have safety and security for all. And we believe that although it's up to the decision makers, the public sector, of course, to defend safety and security in society, we believe that businesses can and should be part of the solution. That is our conviction. Involving the business community is essential when creating a more socially sustainable and inclusive society. With this in mind, we then need to ask ourselves, what can the business community do, and how can we become more proactive in fighting crime here in Stockholm? How can we initiate and strengthen further cooperation between the public and the private sector? And what can Sweden and Stockholm learn from Canada and the US in this regard? Our hope here today is to try to answer these questions and start drawing up a roadmap. A roadmap for the benefit of the people here and the businesses and decision makers and the entire, in fact, legal chain. We believe that we can achieve this together with an open mind and with collaboration. My name is Andreas Hatzigeorgiou. I'm the CEO here at the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. And I'm so glad, proud, and excited that we have partnered with the Rutgers Miller Center for Community Protection and Resilience in partnership with the Center on Policing to tackle exactly these issues, because these issues are pressing and we have no time to lose, and there is a real risk for a slippery slope. These centers bring together various experts to conduct cutting-edge research and provide education on the protection of society from dangers affecting safety and overall welfare. We have no less than 7 international renowned experts here with us today. A warm welcome to our delegation. I think they deserve a warm round of applause, all of them. And thank you to all of you that are participating here today. You are in fact experiencing a unique opportunity to learn more, to gain insights, to connect, and together actually, in some way, make a change. This work starts here today. To start things off then, I would like to give a warm welcome to Paul Goldenberg up on the stage. Mr. Goldenberg is a senior fellow at the Rutgers Miller Center and chief advisor for policy and international policing at the Rutgers Center on Policing. A warm round of applause. Welcome up, Paul. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you very much. And it's apropos that Roberto started out with a very dangerous moment in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in that gas station. And I'm here today to tell you that you're extremely correct, but for me, it's when I have to pay the bill when I fill my tank for gas, and it's now $100 versus $20. So I can feel your pain. Things have changed. Things have changed. You know, we started our work here in Sweden and in Stockholm a few years ago. Unfortunately, well, my first trip to Sweden was for a very different mission. For full transparency, I fell in love with a beautiful Swedish girl and wound up in Gävle, Sweden for a while, where my nickname was Papagoya because I would always mimic the Swedish language and not know anything of what I was speaking, but that is the truth. So it was really for a very wonderful, very good time, and I had an amazing time here in Sweden. Unfortunately, my second time back was not so pleasant. I'm sure most of you know of the OSCE, the Office for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and I was appointed by the Helsinki Commission some years ago to head up a special police matters unit that was dealing really with the human dimension and human rights. We weren't there necessarily to train police in traditional policing. We were there to really build capacity between vulnerable communities and the community and the police who are sworn to protect them. This is 15, 16 years ago, and many things have changed and transitioned, and for the better and for the good. And we did spend some time back then in Malmo, where unfortunately we were seeing some troubled times. So our work is very unique, and I'll take us quickly through the PowerPoint. Our work is unique because we're not only most of us all came from very senior level police positions in the United States and Canada, but the type of work that many of us ultimately transitioned to or transitioned out of traditional policing, and we became much more involved in better understanding that the mission of policing will only succeed if there's communities of trust between the police and the communities they serve. And that's very much how the business community operates. If your customers, if your clients, if your patrons don't trust your product or trust how that product is branded, they're not going to come. And that is another topic that we covered yesterday, which is the impact of disinformation and misinformation on brand. The fact that businesses and corporations in democratic countries are coming under attack to foment mistrust and distrust. If you're going to attack democracy, you're going to attack the companies, the businesses that support those efforts, and that is to sow chaos and distrust. So our mission at the Miller Center is not statewide; it's really global. We have been on the ground during very troubled times in Belgium. We were on the ground during and immediately after the terrorist attacks, working with Jewish communities, working with Muslim communities, working with the police, and ultimately working with Flemish communities. And really, it was about building capacity. And again, I'll run through the slides in a moment. So, like the business community, the policing community is transitioning, and I don't think there's anyone in this room that hasn't heard of, well, George Floyd. George Floyd was a schismatic. It changed everything. And right now, we are in a very, very precarious place in the United States, and we are also rethinking what does policing really mean, and what steps do we have to take to improve capacity between our communities. So the information that we're sharing with you in the days ahead, it's not that we're better, smarter, wiser. It's not about North Americans coming in on their cavalry horses to tell you what's good and what's bad. But what we can do is share our experiences. This is about sharing experiences. What we can do is share some of our pain and say, look, this is what worked. This is what didn't work. And that's the best we can do. It's not about when people claim I'm an expert or our team are experts. My mother always advised me, an expert is someone that knows more and more about less and less. We have too many experts today. It's about sharing. It's about understanding. And that's really what we're doing at the Miller Center, and we're very proud of that work. My work here, our work here really started because of a conversation with two individuals that I had the opportunity to meet while I was speaking up in Canada. I think it was Toronto, but I don't even remember. It probably was Ottawa. But it's Anna Ekstrom, which I want to introduce, and also my dear friend Amir Rostani. They approached me and said, "We just heard about your experiences. How quickly can you get to Stockholm?" And to me, that's forward thinking. To me, that's thought leadership. And then I am not the chamber. Your chamber here is way ahead of the curve. It took us 20 years for the light bulb to go off to say, we need to work with the business community, and the business community needs to build capacity with the police. And not to be the business community here, the chamber isn't looking to become an investigative body for the police, but you have to share information. You have to build capacity. And when Danielle and Frederick reached out, and we had many conversations over the last 8-9 months, where they continuously called us and said, "Tell us about this. Tell us about that. We need to know more. We need to learn more. We need to stay ahead of the curve." Because everything is perception. And Sweden is looked upon the world as one of the safest, seriously, most wonderful places in the world, and like that, things can change. Like that, they change. Look, if any of us thought that I would have been, or you would have been sitting behind your computer doing Zoom calls, how crazy is it that I met people after 9 months that I never met in flesh, because all I knew them was from a Zoom call in our society, or our children would be sitting behind computers for 2 years of their lives, which, by the way, the outcome on that is going to be something that is not going to be so healthy for society. And that's why, if we want to know why now we see an increase in violence in the streets, our children, your children, are being fed some very, very, very scary conspiracy stories out there. And it's coming from social media platforms. So let's talk for a second about the Miller Center. I already went through the mission. We call it CPR. I'm going to just dive right in. We conduct research. Research is extremely important to our mission. Without the research, we have nothing. Without the data, we have nothing. And that's why we're very thankful to our relationship. We're depending on people like Amir and Anna. We've been receiving tremendous data, not only about Swedish society, but they've been helping us across the board. We've been bringing poor Amir over to the United States and Canada continuously because we need his expertise. Our impact has literally been global. We're on the ground in Chicago. And you want to talk about a nightmare scenario? I can't tell you how many children have been shot in Chicago in the past 2 weeks. Babies, children. This is a global situation. And with the invasion, it's just going to get worse. We have given direct assistance. When we say assistance, everywhere we go, there's a takeaway. And even I have to tell you, our takeaway, what we learned from the Swedish police, honestly, in the United States, the police have operated historically in a quasi-military fashion. And we were able to see through our friends with the Swedish police, Jack and others, that really the way that the Swedish police that we see is almost in a corporate style. And that's very effective. The thinking opens it up for more consideration of how to do things. And we're changing in the United States. So we're learning from you as well. Please know that and understand that. We signed an official memorandum of understanding. We know that Ulf is not here, but we brought him to the United States about 2.5 years ago, right before the pandemic, and we signed a memorandum of understanding with between our Attorney General and that of your leadership. We worked on the ground in Brussels. We worked on the ground in Paris. That was a very painful experience for us because we literally were called by the Jewish community to meet with them because they were deeply concerned about their security and their safety. And the day that myself and the former Attorney General of New Jersey, we were there as liaisons, the day that we were there, literally meeting with the Jewish community, the attacks took place three blocks away. So we spent 27 hours with the Jewish community on the ground, and it was ugly. You don't want to go through that. You don't want to have any of your communities go through that. It was horrific. It was really horrific. This is who the center is. John Farmer is our former Attorney General. He is an icon in the United States. He headed up the 9/11 Commission after 9/11. He wrote the book on that, quite literally. He would have been here today, and he had a health issue, which he's fine, and it took him away. The second guy with that dapper little look there and the little thing there, they set me up with that. I mean, that was 4 years ago. This is Rick Fuentes right here. Colonel, can you stand for a second? Rick was our colonel of the state police. What that means, he was the minister of state police. He was the top person, headed all police operations in New Jersey. And he's a very humble fellow. I will throw him under the bus. He also has his PhD, and he's a smart fellow. So we're very proud of him. Dr. Ron Clark, a former undersecretary. I think I brought him here. Jack Donahue, you're going to meet. Jack was a 3-star chief of the New York City Police Department. It doesn't get any higher than that, other than the commissioner. So Jack is here. Jack took a very bad turn in life. In addition to being a police chief, he became an attorney, and we were very disappointed when that happened. But we love him anyway. We love him anyway. We're very fond of Jack. We have Jonathan Bierman. Jonathan Bierman is now the deputy mayor of Brussels. Jonathan is very much a part of our team. We won't use the word client, but we worked with him, and it was a love affair between us and Jonathan, and he became very much a part of our Rutgers team, and occasionally travels with us. But being the deputy mayor of Brussels keeps him extremely busy, so he would have been here today, but we'll see him shortly, because when we leave here, we head over to the UK. Saad Armani is the highest ranking Muslim police officer in all of Europe. He's a deputy commissioner. He's brilliant, speaks 7 languages, and we're very lucky to have him. He has a keen understanding of extremism and the impact on society. So you can see we're not an American team. We're very much quite the contrary. We have Sean Griffin, and Sean is the former head of MI5 and the counterterrorism coordinator. Has a brilliant reputation in the UK, and I think we're down to a minute, Mark, right? All right. So we have Ava, Sasi. They are not with us, so I won't go into too much detail, but they are our engines, really work behind the curtain. And a special thank you to the gentleman there with the camera, Mark Genetempo, who keeps everything together for the center. He travels all over the world with me, and we couldn't do it. We literally couldn't do it without him. So I finished it up, I believe, on time. That's who we are. We are not experts. We use the Robin Hood theory. Take from the rich meaning in expertise, rich meaning in successful programs, rich meaning lessons learned, best practices, and we share. And that's what we're good at. We're good at connecting, and that's who we are. So we are people that worked in pretty senior level jobs that have left our egos way behind a long time ago. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us. So listen, I want to say thank you so much for welcoming us here today. I think the next couple of hours, you're going to see some things that are pretty interesting. And we're going to close it out with how we believe a public-private formalized relationship between the policing, law enforcement, security services, and the business community can really be something that benefits all of Sweden in the long run. And that's why we're here. And I want to thank our hosts here at the chamber. And the program is now yours.
Thank you, Papa Goya. Incidentally, I can speak on behalf of my distinguished partner, Jack Donahue, in saying we are not going to soon forget that name. And I've always heard how Paul and John, and it's sort of a signal in how closely the Miller Center works with some communities that are endangered in one respect or another, that he always ends up on scene or close to the scene when there's a terror attack. Now, we're a couple of old detectives, so there's a point where coincidences become persons of interest. So you've been at way too many of these things, Paul, before things happen. So look, at my job here this morning is to give you a little bit of insight into the report that we did for the Swedish police. And it's so good to be back, and Andreas is right, this is a wonderful, wonderful country. We have missed being here for 2 years. We actually worked on and off with the Swedish police for a 2-year period, which ended literally in December of 2019, and the report was actually sent to the Swedish police in January of 2020. A month later, we were locked down and locked out. So we never had a chance to come back. We actually wanted to do what we're doing this week 2 years ago, but that's fate and Mother Nature, I guess. So we're really glad for the opportunity to come and to speak to you about this. I'm going to move through this kind of quickly, and maybe I'm not going to go into so much detail as I would if this was a police audience. I'm going to try and cover some of the thematic areas of this, but I want to start out with a comparison. Let's take a look at Sweden, and I'm using 2020 crime statistics here. 360 shooting incidents, 47 shooting murders, 117 shooting hits. Shooting hits are when it's not a homicide, it's bad aim or good medical treatment, right? And a victim lives. That's what we call a shooting hit. So there's New Jersey by scale, okay, to Sweden. And let's take a look at New Jersey. We have almost the same, it's the fourth smallest state, okay, in the United States. We have almost the same amount of people as the entire country of Sweden. We have probably about 9.5 million now. Sweden, I think, has about 11. We have 15 major cities crammed into that state, 566 municipalities within which there are 479 police departments. Believe me, it is great having a single national police force. When you have to find a way to information share among 479 full-time police departments, that's a chore, but it's absolutely necessary in New Jersey because of what you see next. 250 shooting murders, that's 400% higher in the state of New Jersey than in the entire country of Sweden. So we wish New Jersey was as safe as Sweden is right now. But the fact is that the murders have gone from extremely low to a dangerous level per capita in Sweden, which is why we've engaged in this collaboration. 1,162 shooting hits, and crime guns recovered, almost 4,000. I'm going to talk about guns because I want you to look at guns in an entirely different perspective, and I think you'll see a gun, a crime gun, in an entirely different perspective as I move through this. So I want to key on this area right here. This is what we call the Route 21 corridor. It's a triangle. It's about 4% of the state's surface area, and it connects the cities of Jersey City, Newark, and Paterson. In that little triangle, 55% of that violent crime occurs. 55% and less than 4% of the surface area. If you want to draw a comparison, there it is. Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö, where about 70 to 80% of the violent crime in Sweden occurs. So when we've been coming here over the last few years, we've been concentrating on the information sharing environment in ways that we found worked in New Jersey. And that's because we were facing the level of violent crime that was unbelievable, and we had to find a way to do things differently. And so we can draw some comparisons here in ways that we can provide, so the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented, all right? That we can provide what we felt after falling down, stumbling, getting up, refiguring it, being a little bit innovative, and then finally getting a program together. Why should anybody else have to reinvent the wheel? If there's best practices out there, if you can use them, if you can apply them to the Swedish model, then that's great. So Paul covered a little bit of this, but I just want to tell you the trips that we made here, the trips the Swedish police made to New Jersey. So it was back in 2018 when Paul first brought Amir Rastami and a small Swedish police, 2018, to New Jersey. They visited the Regional Operations and Intelligence Center. How many people here know what the Fusion Center Network is in the United States, or have heard of the Fusion Center Network? So after 9/11, we realized that the state of information sharing was absolutely dismal. Even the federal agencies weren't sharing information among themselves, but the state and local cops had to clean up the mess, okay, of 9/11, and we realized we had to do something to connect both our police departments and to share information among states. There's 78 fusion centers in the United States right now, which operate as a gauntlet for gathering information. These fusion centers produce intelligence reports, not just on counterterrorism, but on crime fighting, and mostly crime fighting now. But 24 hours is a long time if you need information right away. It's the right way to do it. But intelligence is really just information subjected to analysis. And that takes about 24 hours. And some of the things that we had to do in some of these high crime areas, we needed to get information to detectives very, very quickly. And so we established 3 real-time, what we call real-time crime centers. In the NYPD, it's called the Lower Manhattan Security Initiative, which is you put together products tactically, just information to be able to provide the people on the street so they can help solve crime and not have to go back and do that work themselves. And we're going to get to that as I move along. So I first met Amir in 2018. He looked at the ROC, he looked at the real-time crime centers, he looked at our crime gun intelligence program, and he said, we would like, state police, teams of people, along with Rutgers, to come to Sweden and take a look at some of the way that we're responding to crime. So we did our initial assessment in December of 2018. That's when we first came here. We interviewed police officials here in Stockholm and in Gothenburg. Then Amir and Gunnar Appelgren and Ulf came to the United States in February 2019, and John Farmer, who's there in the middle, they signed a collaborative agreement to share information on crime fighting. We did that in Atlantic City. We returned again to Sweden for a follow-up visit. We brought with us some of the commanders from New Jersey State Police that were responsible for information sharing. And that's what they basically spoke about. We also brought ATF officials, because the one thing we don't have in the United States is grenade attacks. Okay, now I know that you have grenade attacks here because when illegal arms from some of the areas of South Europe make their way up into Sweden, those arms shipments sometimes include hand grenades, and that's why you're seeing them here. But we don't have any experience whatsoever. We don't see this on the streets in any of the cities at all. So we brought the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to actually talk to the bomb squad. Now, what came out of that is that they got an invitation, and it's an open invitation, to the Swedish police to come to the Redstone Arsenal in the United States for additional training, okay, on processing those types of crime scenes that involve hand grenades. We made our last visit here in December of 2019, and we brought gun experts from the state police, as well as the Newark police director. We talked about what did your forensic examinations look like on the guns, and also management accountability, something that Jack Donahue was going to talk about in a couple of minutes. And in January 2020, again, we submitted the report. So the report contains 39 recommendations, which were broken down into 5 major themes. I'm going to cover just a few of those real quick. Police responses to shooting and explosive incidents, shifting the focus to the gun, taking a look at the gun. The gun isn't just for trial and prosecution. The gun is there to be able to give us information to actually prevent the next shooting and part of the investigation. So it's kind of turning the gun and having a different role in these investigations. The process and speed of crime gun forensics. The Swedish police had the same issue that the New Jersey State Police did in the amount of time it took to process a gun. All right, so we were able to take a look at that and provide some assistance. Prioritizing investigative targets. Incidentally, there is a there's an algorithm where you can almost achieve probability in making a determination and who is going to be a recidivist, who's going to return to crime once they leave jail, especially if they've been involved in a crime already and now they're back out on the street. So we figured out a weighted algorithm to be able to assess somebody's at risk for continued crime, and I'll show you that. And ComStat and relentless follow-up, again, that's something that Jack will go over. So the first thing, police response to shooting and explosive incidents. The CSI here is tremendous. They have great response, great technology. There is a major crime investigator that does respond to serious crimes. The one shortcoming that we saw, which is easy actually to overcome, is the intelligence component. Because when you're at a scene, you want to keep your detectives on scene and moving that scene from the processing of evidence right into the investigation. You don't have a lot of time to catch suspects. You don't have a lot of time to find witnesses, all right? If that detective investigator has to go back to the station and sit and run criminal histories and leave that scene, what do you think the bad guys are doing while the detective is doing that. They're getting on trains, buses, and planes, and they're going to places where they're never going to be found. The longer you pull that detective off the scene, the less the chance that you're going to be able to arrest somebody in the short term. And leaving that person on the street is dangerous. He's already pulled the trigger. There's already been a victim. So what we did, I mentioned the real-time crime centers, right? So there's a real-time crime center in Newark, in Trenton, and in South Jersey. If there's a homicide anywhere in the state, they do what we call a person of interest package. Now, the detective is still on scene, right? Still helping CSI process the scene. Within 2 hours, these are the only things I'm going to read. Within 2 hours, they get a person of interest package, which has a complete criminal history, any active warrants on both the suspect and the victim. That's important because usually the victim or the victim's family becomes the next retaliatory shooting. So it's important that you do a person of interest packages on both. Any prior inquiries from police departments, any motor vehicle stops that ever occurred in the state of New Jersey or elsewhere, any prison records and the visitors to that person in prison, any license plate reader information, job history, all known associates and families, vehicles that they own. So all of that is put together in about 3 pages and handed to the detective while they're still on scene. I'm going to just go back here because I need to say something before I go to that next slide. So I want to talk real quick about organizations, about criminal organizations. So we know from watching the traditional organized crime movies about La Cosa Nostra, the mafia, even Tony Soprano, okay, that there's a pyramid aspect to these criminal organizations. Well, Eric and Bob, who are going to talk to you later about RICO, did such a good job that these organizations fragmented, and they're now almost disintegrated, and they're like social networks. So a gang nowadays looks like this. Now, if you can figure this out, I can't figure it out by looking at it, and I've been looking at this slide for a year, okay? But there's 4 things on this slide that stand out. These are all crime scenes involving members of the gang, and they all link to this .40 caliber weapon. And when you take that weapon and you start drawing connections to that weapon as a result of ballistics comparisons, this is what it looks like. Makes a lot more sense, right? This is why if you make the gun the focus, not just for trial and prosecution, but for investigation and prevention, okay, you can actually be in a position to be able to pursue and arrest those people that are responsible for crime. Process and speed of crime of the forensic examinations. Get the gun to the lab as soon as possible. In New Jersey, any crime gun has to be to the lab in 24 hours. Eliminate administrative obstacles. A gun generally has to go through a process in the lab, and that process here in Sweden can take as much as 10 months. Prior to 2015, the process in New Jersey took 10 months. What we did is instead of the gun going into every queue in every one of those 6 or 7 units, we made a room. And now the scientists come to the room. The DNA technicians, the photographers, the crime scene investigators, the person who does the test firing, and the person who went through shell casing information into the integrated ballistic information system. They're all in one room. So when a gun gets now put in, it circles that room in a matter of an hour. We get information back to the detectives that are doing this investigation in 24 to 48 hours. That's down from 10 months. And all we did was build a room and just reverse the bureaucracy of it. And this is easy to do. This is a problem New Jersey State Police had, and it's an easy problem to solve. And of course, you can share that lead value information and keep this guy on scene so he doesn't have to come back to the station. This is the algorithm I was talking about. So, and it's very, very simple. It's a very simple weighted algorithm. When you lock somebody up, you have an opportunity to look at their criminal history, their gun arrests, whether they were a suspect in a shooting, whether they were a victim of a shooting. The last 2 categories are the more heavily weighted because you've already identified that person to be willing to fire a gun or to be in gunplay, either as a victim or as a shooter. So that weighted algorithm has worked out pretty well for us with a 60 to 70% probability of being able to predict if this person was on the street, back on the street, that he would commit more crimes. And that's important to a prosecutor. You can't use it as probable cause to arrest somebody or to prosecute them, but it's intelligence information. This is my last slide here. Jack's going to be talking about CompStat. I'm sorry we had to go over this so quickly. That's our meeting in New Jersey. This is Jack's meeting in the NYPD. If you want more information about what I just spoke about, I penned an article for Police Chief Magazine back in February 2019, which talks about some of the things that I just mentioned. And Amir Rustami and I co-authored an article in Police Chief Magazine in November 2021, which specifically talks about the collaboration. So I want to thank you for your attention. Yesterday was great. You've been a great audience, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Please stay for a couple of follow-up questions. Sure. Extremely interesting, really. So, working closely with Swedish law enforcement, would you say there are similarities between how law enforcement in Sweden works and does things, and how US law enforcement does things? And what are the key differences, you would say?
Well, very much similar, almost identical, when it comes to, crime scene processing, when it comes to actually doing gun examinations. Again, most of the things that we saw are obstacles which could be easily overcome. So, and part of the comfort of realizing that is the fact that the processes are very close. You go to most countries and the police are operating in pretty much the same way in terms of how they handle evidence, how they process evidence, how they use evidence for trial or prosecution. And so, you're not reinventing the wheel. You're simply looking around to say, does somebody have a better idea about doing this than we have? And it wasn't such a long time ago, prior to 2015, that we were asking that question. And that's before we started the Crime Gun Intelligence Program and began to focus on the gun. And after that, everything changed. In 2020, when the United States was suffering dramatically increased gun violence in every city, Newark, New Jersey shootings dropped by 30%. You know why they dropped by 30%? Because of this. Because Anthony Ambrose, who actually came here in December 2019 to talk to the Swedish police, he believed in this program wholeheartedly, and every single gun didn't slip through the net. He didn't put that gun in the evidence locker and forget about it until he had to go to trial. Okay, that gun was processed. All the lead value information was taken out of it. He locked up the people who were the serial shooters on the street. He prioritized them. He targeted them with limited police resources, and the effects of it were obvious.
Very interesting. You mentioned, or actually it was Paul who mentioned, that you are also learning from Swedish law enforcement, and you pick up things here in Stockholm and in Sweden. What are the strategies implemented by Swedish law enforcement that you think could be viable in the US?
So Paul actually mentioned it, the corporate model. We had a chance.
What does that mean, the corporate model?
It's more of a business community type model of training and the way that your officers interact with the community. And I can tell you, it starts in the training, because when we went up to Umeå back in December of 2019, a little cold up there then, that's where the academy was, right? I don't know if it's Amir, if it's for all the Swedish police. Okay. And we had a chance to look at the training, and it was integrated into the college campus. So in the United States, you probably know, police training is still largely militaristic, or paramilitary is a better way of saying, not militaristic, because we're not warriors, we're peacekeepers, and that's something sometimes you got to remember. We're not warriors, okay? We're supposed to maintain the peace. So I think the way that the Swedish police approached this was very sound, by integrating the police into a social environment with the people that they're going to have to serve right from the outset of their training. And I think that was a great takeaway for us.
a feeling of, or among Swedish citizens, especially in light of the recent riots, for instance, during Easter, is that, you know, this paramilitaristic approach is something that people would appreciate here in Sweden. You hear people talk about weakness and that the police is not tough enough towards criminals and others that might be, you know, causing these riots. What's your perspective on this?
Well, you know, police departments nowadays have become like in the United States, we have sort of a number you dial 411 where you can, you know, say, you know, my sink doesn't work or the lights are out, the electricity is out. And then there's 911, which is the emergency line that you call to get ambulances or police. I always say that the police have become not just 911, but 411. So they're doing everything now. We're an outlet, we're an extension of the community for every problem that the community has. And look, I think, you know, and you all saw it just like we did on the TV, you know, the cities were burning. I thought the cops acted very, very professionally through all of that. And under very, very difficult circumstances, a number of police officers lost their lives. Which is absolutely the worst thing that can certainly happen to you in that profession, or to somebody that you know. So, you know, it's.
You mentioned also, Rick, hand grenades, and that you have basically in the US not experience with handling hand grenades, whereas in Sweden it's quite common.
Yeah.
I mean, common, quote unquote. Why do you think this is the case? And is there something that we can, you mentioned also partnerships and collaboration around bomb squads, but how can we deal with this situation, you think?
So weapon shipments, when criminal street gangs in Sweden or criminal street gangs in Norway purchase weapon shipments from decommissioned, let's say, military weapons in South Europe where the conflicts were some time back. Like I said, they mix in the hand grenades with those shipments, which is why they're appearing in Sweden and in other places. We've discussed with the Swedish police and with Amir the trafficking routes from Southern Europe through mainland Europe, across the Öresund Bridge, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, you know, Norway into Sweden. So there's a bit of a gauntlet there. The question becomes, it's not the information sharing in Sweden that matters there. It's the information sharing in the rest of Europe, okay? Is the rest of Europe and what they know about those shipments being shared with the people that are, or, you know, with the agencies that are actually suffering the consequences of those weapons getting into the hands of criminal street gangs. So I don't know, I don't think that environment is very healthy. I think a lot needs to be done. And again, these were growing pains we had to get over in the United States after 9/11. Very much the same situation. We had to fix that wheel. It was horrible, and we couldn't let another 9/11 happen again.
Thank you so much, Colonel Rick Fuentes. A warm round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Next, we'll move on to the discussion on strategies and methods of policing, with a focus on so-called precision and intelligence-led policing. For this, we have Chief Jack Donoghue to the stage, and Chief Donoghue is a senior fellow for strategy and technology at the Rutgers Center on Policing, and also a senior fellow at the Rutgers Miller Center. He has served 32 years with the New York City Police, serving as a 3-star chief of strategic initiatives. A warm round of applause. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anders. And I really appreciate the hospitality that's been shown to us so far in our time in Sweden and Stockholm in particular, and the collaboration that we have with the Swedish National Police. Thanks so much. And I also want to make a point out something that's, you know, I've learned everything. I've learned a lot of things since I've been here, but one of the things I've learned that struck me was my colleague's name of Papa Goya. So I'm glad to have Papa Goya here with us. You're not going to live that one down. Precision policing. By a raise of hands, who has heard of either the term precision policing or CompStat? Has anybody heard that before? So a handful of hands go up, which is good. Maybe I'll reinforce what you know about it or provide a little bit more insight as to what that process is or what those processes are. I'm going to talk about three things over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. Police accountability is a common refrain. You've heard it in the United States for a while. It's part of a reform movement, but accountability is something that only has to do with holding police accountable, or does it deal with something of accountability in the or does a reform have something to do with the form of accountability in social justice methods? And really, back in the 1990s, what we saw is that accountability was missing in terms of the ability for police to provide outcomes that were substantive to society. Real accountability is a demonstration that the public investment in policing are meaningful, effective, and legal. Let's call that real management accountability. New York, my hometown where I came from, and as Anders had said, I did 32 years in policing, held every rank from cadet through chief. You can see some pictures here of what that city looked like. That's the Cross Bronx Expressway, Interstate 95, which runs the entire length of the United States on the eastern seaboard. That's a block in the southern Manhattan. That's a block in the Bronx also. And back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, quality of life had declined in New York City, so much so that there was a rise in victimization, a decline in quality of life, and urban flight from large cities. That combined to do two main things, which energize the population to seek a change in political leadership, but mobilize the business community to influence what needed to happen in New York. Management accountability for policing in CompStat. If you've heard that term, what it really is just a portmanteau for comparative statistics, CompStat. It's a process that brings policing executives closer to the ground truth and gives and empowers police executives to look at data, the data that's in their repositories, things that police collect, which is really crime complaints, and understand through the process of analysis that Rick had spoken about a little bit earlier, what can be done to change what the police can do to bring about some changes in behaviors in the population, but to do the things that police do more effectively. So it's participatory. CompStat brings together people from all around the police organization to think through what are those problems that they're being faced with, and what are the creative solutions to implement that are within the police power to do, or through collaboration. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It's results oriented. When you think about the business community, the bottom line is what matters. There is also social objectives. Here is the same thing. The bottom line is, what are the objective? What are we trying to do, and how do you explain that clearly to the organization and to the people that you serve? Bottom line is to make safer communities and bring down crime so that people feel safer. I attended those meetings for for dozens of years while I was in the police department, and it's a process that makes you believe that police can have a difference in managing crime and to bring about social change for the better. It's a result of data collection that can empower police to understand what's happening, and it does require really firm objective goals. And it can make policing more responsive and more caring. It requires simple messaging. The four principles of CompStat are timely and effective tactics, rapid deployment, effective tactics, and relentless follow-up. And that sounds like, business speak, because it is. It was something that was so fundamental to change in the mindset of police that they can do something. Well, how do you explain it to someone to make it so easy? When we think about timely and accurate intelligence, well, we're thinking about the crime data that comes in. What happened, the who, what, when, where, how, why? And to ask those questions, but doing it in an environment where it's creating a desire to understand more so that you can come up with solutions. You talk about the examples of robbery that may happen on the streets of New York, or street fighting, antisocial behaviors. Well, when you try to unpack why that's happening, then it may result in an assault, which is data that we would collect information on. Well, what happened? Why did that assault happen? Well, did it happen after the bars closed? Were patrons being served after they were intoxicated? Is there a way to go to the nightlife, the hospitality industry, to better police themselves, to work in collaboration so that people aren't intoxicated when they're leaving, they get involved in arguments and fights, which raises the degrees of assault? Or people that are gambling on the street, shooting dice games, where an argument will break out and then someone will get stolen, will have their money stolen. So it's diagnosing the root causes of problems and coming up with creative solutions that will intervene in advance. Rapid deployment, finding out where the problems are. So that's the where. And then putting police officers in that area with the mindset of what they're going to do is engage with the public. The effective tactics. What are the tools that are in policing's power, in their authorities, to be able to intervene in advance of something happening? It's this mindset that police can have an effect, and it's also an action-oriented approach. And this idea of relentless follow-up, of continuing to go back and ask questions about what did we do right, what did we do wrong? But more importantly, not to take time and follow it to evaluate everything to a scientific precision to see if it was effective. You try and get that gross approach to see if it's working, and are the police tactics or are the deployments working? And if they're not, try something new. The idea of moving fast and taking control of situations, not waiting for something to be responsive. And remember, in the United States, what took time for cities to look like those pictures that I showed a little bit earlier, what happened took time for it to decline in that way. It didn't happen overnight. And by using these principles, we can see what can be impacted. The crimes that we look at are not every single crime. You cannot fight every crime. There's penal laws and penal codes and criminal laws that can occupy volumes. But what the police in New York did, and this is just the New York experience, looked at 7 crimes: murder, rape, robbery, felony assault, burglary, breaking into a residence or a business, major theft, and vehicle theft. And it was a shortcut to saying that either crime was going up or going down by looking at just that very small cadre of crimes. But from that flowed, over time, the need to look at other, what I'd call precipitating crimes. Those outcomes obviously prevented crime, reduced quality of life complaints and issues in New York, and also helped solve crime, because you start collecting more data. You find out who are those perpetrators of crimes. By looking at it, you're also able to feed your information systems in ways that can help your detectives go out and be proactive in solving crimes. It does empower decision makers. The process empowers decision makers. It encourages creativity, and it fosters critical thinking at all levels within the organization. But it also requires, and when Rick spoke a little bit earlier about the business mindset, it improves data collection because you're relentlessly following up on what's happening. You improve your data collection, which also improves analytic skills, which feeds into your intelligence process, which, just like business intelligence, how do you improve the services and delivery of services to your clients, customers, patrons, and it also improves communication. It improves communication, that process, because it's that relentless follow-up that's continuing to share information internally, externally, vertically within the organization, laterally within the organization. It makes people much more adept in understanding how to work collaboratively. Now, I started by talking about the compelling pictures by looking at what happened in New York City and the decline. By the time we came to 9/11, we were actually losing more police personnel, and we had achieved some pretty impressive results in how crime had begun to decline. And that was kind of engross use of policing resources. What happened when we started losing personnel and we had to split our attention between counterterrorism efforts in New York, as well as keeping crime down, making people feel safe. You had to become much more adept, much more focused in what we were doing with our personnel, and used intelligence-led policing programs, as well as something called hotspot policing, which is using our people in highly concentrated areas to focus on the densest locations where the most volumes of crime occur. Very similar to the triangle areas that Rick was talking about a little bit earlier. When we think about intelligence-led policing, you think about how you do hotspot policing. When you think about policing in general, it requires engagement from police to the public. When you do have crime surges in locations, you have to expect the police are going to be there and physically out there touching people, stopping cars and stopping people. It's what police do. And it doesn't mean everyone is guilty, but it does require those levels of interaction, and it's uncomfortable for some, and people sometimes get critical of policing and those tactical methods of doing it, but it requires that because interaction and policing and police on the street is fundamental to improving public safety. Intelligence-led policing really just gets down to the collection of information, that who, what, when, where, how, and why, and thinking about it and how to design those interventions over time. When we thinking about how we collect and what we collect information on, it's from open source, it's from policing reports, it's from other social media, it's from informants, or even technical tools that we have for collecting on for investigative purposes. It all feeds that information ecosystem that helps inform police how to better deploy and design interventions. And when we think about intelligence-led policing, I could go into a number of examples for what we did in very small areas. Model block program is one of them, where on one block, back in the early form of using intelligence-led policing, one block had 5 shootings, 15 assaults, 5 robberies over the course of 1 year, on one block where 500 families lived. It was all driven by a drug gang. By intervening with that drug gang and then shutting down that block, which was a major conduit for drug sales along the Northeast, we were able to bring down crime when we took down that particular drug gang, bring down crime for the succeeding year down to 0, and have a more engaged community. So it's that very precise application of policing in a very highly problematic area, and then designing interventions after the fact to improve quality of life for people. I started by thinking by talking about how you can relate policing in business to outcomes. It's always about the bottom line. And public safety isn't only on the police. Obviously, there are numerous inputs that come with making communities safer, but having the approach of thinking that police can make a difference, and by focusing their efforts and their energies, it can have a positive result. I want to show some figures and I want to show you some visuals about how New York City had changed in both its the crime climate to where it is now. And it did come at a price where some people could be critical about incarceration, but there are some very profound outcomes from this. In New York City versus the country, we spoke about crime reduction. And over that 30-year period, we saw murder decline 80%. The murder rate in New York City in 1990 was 1,390 per 100,000 person population. There were 2,262 murders in 1990 in New York City. In 2017, there were 292. They've started to uptick as we've seen nationally. But in that same time frame, murder declined in the nation only 8%. New York City was a significant portion of that national driver in between that time frame. You look at robbery, again, New York City down almost 87%, and the nation down almost roughly 60%. A noted criminologist, a gentleman named Frank Zimmering from the University of California, did a study using independent variables to see if the data that was in New York City was accurate, or was there some sort of playing with the numbers. Independently verified that there was something else happening in New York City that was not happening around the country. And I encourage you to go read his book. It's called The City That Became Safe. They don't know, nobody knows, that's that je ne sais quoi of what has made New York City safe. And it was this process, this idea that management accountability, holding your managers accountable to doing what you can do to co-create public safety. And although that circle is kind of off to the side, it's 75.2% in a 30-year reduction in crime overall versus a national reduction of 46%. Something else happened in New York City. The visuals, I'm going to show two sets of maps. The first is a chronological sequence of in New York City, there's 77 precincts. Those are regions that are owned by precinct commanders. Those are the areas where policing is divided among the 5 boroughs. And what you'll see is a time lapse of the last 30 years of how the density of crime has reduced over time. So here, 1990, density of murders by precincts. The darker the red, the more volume of crime, of murders occurred. By the time you get to 2020, there was only two precincts in 1990 with 0 murders. That's up in the corner and down at the south end of Staten Island. By the time you get to 2020, you can see that there are more than half of the precincts had no murders. When you look at the robberies, again, we're looking at the density. The entire city was red with the number of robberies. The rate of robbery in 1990 in New York City was over 1,500 per 100,000 population. By 2020, it was at 30. So the consequences have always been, well, that means New York City was incarcerating more people and New York State was incarcerating more people. So if they're away in jail, then they can't commit crime. But actually, it had an effect where even though there were larger numbers at the very outset of people that were incarcerated, the crime continued to decline in New York, even though prison populations started to decline. This aberration in 2020 is the compassionate releases for COVID. But even though there was a surge in arrest and it was surges in incarceration, the crime decline persisted, even though those people started to be released. So I'm glad to take any questions, and thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Jack. Extremely interesting. My first question relates to your last slide, because that ended in 2020. What is the current situation when it comes to crime in New York now?
So crime in New York City has slightly begun to increase, and I say that, and I prefaced what my conversation today by talking about how many things have inputs into public safety, and there have been some changes in how policing is working more in mechanisms for prosecution. So I think there's a variety of reasons why, but it is also something that's being experienced more recently nationally too.
When you have looked at Sweden and the situation here, what do you think we can learn when it comes to data management, data collection, dissemination, and how we use intelligence-based systems to make decisions? I'll just share with you, I'll try to summarize what I see in our community and when I speak with CEOs and presidents when it comes to crime and data. Sweden is known for great data across sectors. We have data for basically everything, and people sometimes feel that authorities, agencies are collecting too much data. We have data, perfect detailed data on a very disaggregate level, traffic flows, patents, everything we have data for. But what the business community, I would claim, feels is that we don't really have data, or at least it's not widely spread when it comes to crime. Is that true?
So I can't speak with absolute certainty for what is collected, but some fundamentals and the experiences that many police organizations across America suffer from is both a dearth of data that is relevant. And that holds true for the New York City Police Department back in 1993 or so. We in the United States have a federal collection effort for crime reporting, but is woefully inadequate for that level of information for affecting crime and conditions at a local level. So, and what local police have, and that goes for the area commanders and the district commanders here in Sweden. What they have is ground truth. They have people who understand what's happening in their districts, and they also have an understanding of what crime. So the very raw data. People can tell you how many people were shot, how many cars were stolen, how many houses were broken into, maybe how many people have been robbed. And those are at very gross levels. What it requires is just that human interaction where, so what happened? Tell me what happened in advance. And those are very familiar questions for policing. As Rick said earlier, it's very similar. The how do you get policing done is very consistent across countries. The way that data is collected and what is collected and what we experienced particularly in New York and other major cities is you refine your data collection efforts to achieve the outcomes that you want. We did not have, and certainly no one had the compute power that exists today back in the 1990s. Well, no one, literally no one in the New York City Police Department had anything on computers at a precinct or local level until 1997, 1998. I like to use the example this means that forms were still typed by typewriter, and to, I like to say, you know, to hit a carriage return when you're on a computer, you know, people just hit the button. Well, people in the police department hit the side of the computer screen to make it go, you know, to get to the next line. That's where we were, and we've really accelerated to where police officers now have, you know, well, the cops are now digital natives, right? Where the younger people are joining the police department. They have phones in their hands, and a recognition of that is putting the power of computes into people's hands now. We, in a number of police organizations around the United States, taking reports, getting information is something that's literally on their hip now.
My final question,
Sure.
On accountability, because you were talking about accountability and how important it is with accountability. And of course, obviously, you know, Sweden, the US, we have different systems, mindsets in some ways, cultural, we have different ways of running our public sectors. But accountability. So who is accountable? If crimes goes up, who is accountable?
Yeah. I started by saying, you know, police are entrusted, and government makes investments into policing, and the community, and that's writ large. Citizens should have an expectation that the police are going to be effective in their job. There is, you know, people have to be held accountable for, and I'm going to kind of speak, you know, more broadly. People have to be held accountable for transgressions of the law. Police have to be accountable for what they're charged with. Prosecutors have to be accountable to the public also, to ensure that they find the appropriate prosecuting mechanisms, and for those who are incarcerated, there should be the ability for rehabilitation and reintegration in society. So there's systems that have accountability. When you speak about accountability for policing, and you know, moving from a highly reactive, something happened, now we're going to go do something, to we are going to be proactive in engaging the community in where we see crime happening on the street, to putting our hands on people, where we see perhaps more vehicle accidents with pedestrians or bicyclists, which there are lots of bicycles in Stockholm. Well, if those vehicle conflicts are happening, well, then we should have police out there that are trying to, you know, engage in traffic calming. And so it's holding people accountable for the jobs that they're entrusted and empowered to do. And the CompStat process presents an opportunity to think about it in terms of, you know, a business process, but also bringing to bear, you know, the obligations of what you have to do as police, law and public safety. So
Very interesting. And a big round of applause to Chief Jack Donahue.
Thank you.
This is great. We are learning a lot, and we will continue to learn a lot. But now it's time for a 10-minute break. Please refill your coffee cups, shake some hands, discuss, reflect, and see you back in 10 minutes. Welcome back. We will, in just a few seconds, move on to the more of the legal aspects of policing, which is also a tremendously important dimension, of course, if we're going to succeed with fighting crime. But before we do, I'd like to invite back Paul Goldenberg, just who wants to add something to his introductory remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andres. So what I did want to just say, is that many of you in the room who are entrepreneurs or represent companies or are journalists, you may be asking yourself the question, why are we opening with so much information regarding law enforcement and policing? Because if you don't have an understanding of the criticality that policing plays, not only in your world, but financially, economically, nations have failed if people believe that there's no security. So what we were asked to do, and I just want to clarify, is just to kind of lay a foundation this morning. So there's no mystery. Policing is mystery. The chamber asked us to demystify policing. Demystify it. Take the mystery out of policing. And that's what we're doing today. We're demystifying it for you because you're the reason that we police. And when I say we, I'm talking about Swedish police as well. So it's really about partnership. So I just kind of wanted to give an explanation for some of you out there. I also do want to mention that we have a very close collaboration with Canada. So it's the Canadians, United States, and Sweden that are now working on an initiative called the Information Integrity Lab. And we're going to be also hopefully working closely with our colleagues at the MSB, who have been extremely supportive. I've been working very closely with Amir, who always is in touch with MSB. Why am I mentioning it? Because the threat of disinformation is an absolute threat to the economic well-being of Sweden, United States, and Canada. And the same people trying to attack your democracy and your entrepreneurship are the same people that are trying to attack ours. So we're working, if you can just stand for a second, please, Serge. We invited Serge Blaise from the University of Ottawa at Professional Development Institute to very much be a part of our family. So I did want to thank the Canadians for participating. And you should know that we officially inducted one of your best, not only criminologists, but police professionals, and that's Amir Rostani, who we recently stole away and is now very much a part of our institute, not only in the United States at Rutgers University, but also in Canada as well. Thank you for just letting me provide that information.
Thank you, Paul. So, legal aspects of policing, legal aspects of prosecution, essential for succeeding to promote security and safety. Eric Seidel is an off-counsel for the firm DeMarco Law and an adjunct professor at the Fordham Law School. Robert Gepiel is the CEO of Resilient Minds on the Front Lines and also professor at the Delaware Law School. Both of you, a warm round of applause and welcome up Eric and Robert.
Hi, I'm Eric. And before I was associated with the firm I'm now associated with, I'd been a prosecutor for over 37 years, both in the federal system, an assistant U.S. attorney, and in the state, in the district attorney's offices, as well as head of the New York State Organized Crime Task Force. We're going to talk today, both of us, about RICO. Apparently, it's a big topic. This seems to be a lot of interest. We were asked if, or I was asked if I'd be willing to come to Sweden to talk about RICO, and I hesitated for about a nanosecond and said, of course. So let me begin. We don't have a lot of time. RICO, as you can see, stands for Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. So, what is this? And if I can, yes. It's a federal law. It's a federal criminal law. It was enacted in 1970 by Congress because what there was before RICO just wasn't working. And it was not working against organized crime. Organized crime was finally recognized by the FBI, by American society at large, by the Congress as a big, big problem in a way that it had not been recognized before. Before about 1970, before the 1960s, the FBI, which is the primary federal law enforcement agency that really does the big organized crime cases, they were investigating communists. And that's not to say that there was no reason for that, but you know, the joke was if there were 40 members in a Communist Party meeting, 20 of them were FBI agents. And that's really probably not much of an exaggeration. Finally, the FBI recognized that organized crime, particularly the mafia, was a problem that needed to be addressed. And as a result, Congress created a totally new crime, RICO. That didn't exist before 1970, and it was specifically tailored to focus on organized criminal enterprises. Now, enterprise, you know, there's a definition of enterprise, and look, I'm a lawyer, and probably most of you are not, and I'm not going to do a law school class because it's going to be boring, and my law school classes are probably boring anyway. But you're not interested in that. What you're interested in is the big picture, I think. And the purpose of RICO was to eradicate organized crime, enterprises. An enterprise can be basically anything, any association, in fact. This group of people, because in fact, we're sitting here associated with one another under the right circumstances, which I know don't exist, could be prosecuted as an enterprise. Gangs can be prosecuted as enterprises. Corporations can be prosecuted as enterprises. So it's very broad. And what did RICO do that was new? And believe me, it was totally new. It provided for enhanced criminal penalties. And why was that important? Because when you have a RICO case, when you're prosecuting an enterprise corruption case, what you need is you've got to put evidence on in court. You've got to convince a jury in the United States, and here I believe a judge, that, yeah, there is this enterprise and it violated the law. You need evidence, and usually that evidence will be, a critical part of the evidence will be provided by a cooperator, a criminal who is part of the enterprise. And because these enterprises are secretive and they're resistant to law enforcement and they instill fear, people don't want to be witnesses. Who would want to be a witness and think, if I'm a witness, I'm going to be killed, my family's going to be killed? Why would I want to do this? Well, there's one basic reason that people who are criminals, who are in the enterprise, agree to become witnesses. because they can get a reduced jail sentence. And if they don't, and they're convicted, they're going to go to jail for maybe the rest of their lives. At this point, I need to take a drink of water.
I'm Rob Sepio. I'll be doing an interpretive dance for Jack today. I was a deputy director with the Division of Criminal Justice and an assistant attorney general overseeing OC and financial crimes. Floor is yours,
Thank you,
sir.
Rob. I finished my water. Look, so, you know, I've done this dozens of times over 37 years, and which means I've sat next in front of opposite criminals, and we want them to cooperate. And when we, usually have a background on these people and they're part of the enterprise, and we look for the wink link, somebody who's not as tough as maybe the boss or some other killers in this enterprise. We know about his family, whether maybe he has children, and we sit, we look, and we say, if you work with us and you cooperate, you're not going to go to jail for the rest of your life. And if you don't, and you are convicted, you're never going to see your family again, because you're going to be in jail. Now, he's going to say, oh, well, how can you protect me? And there's an answer. Because at the same time that RICO was enacted, the United States in 1970 enacted the Witness Protection Law, which provided a mechanism to protect witnesses who cooperate. We move them, we give them new identities. You've probably seen movies of this. And we relocate them. And we can relocate their families, associates, and if they're in jail, because usually these are criminals, and when most of the cooperating witnesses in organized crime cases stay in jail for a period of time, there are separate facilities in separate jails to protect them. So we take care of protection, and we give them that incentive to cooperate. Now, why is that important? Because we have to prove at trial the enterprise and what these people in the criminal group are doing. What crimes are they committing? And who knows about that best other than a person inside the group? It is almost impossible to prosecute, investigate successfully enterprises if you don't have cooperators who will explain to a court when you go to trial what this enterprise is all about. You need this. Now, we need this. When I say you, I mean talking generically. What Sweden decides, Sweden decides. But again, this was something new. It was a problem, and we recognized that is a way to deal with the problem, and we've been pretty successful. Another thing that RICO provided for that did not exist was forfeiture. Taking the money, the proceeds of the crime, in other words, from the criminal. In other words, if a person is convicted of RICO, it is mandatory. No choice. There must be forfeiture to the government of the amount of money that this person made from his criminal activity. So if this group, let's say, is doing extortions, drug dealing, gambling, and it's estimated they made $2 million over 2 years, he's convicted, he loses $2 million. It's a big deal. and it's a very effective tool. I've been given the hook. I've been told I'm out of time. So thank you very much.
That's okay. We're going to do a handoff here. We're a tag team. We're going to do a handoff. And so that dovetails another portion of RICO, right, which is those civil penalties and the civil penalties associated with that. Anyone ever see the movie Jerry Maguire? Jerry Maguire. What's the tagline in Jerry Maguire? Show me the money, right? Show me the money. You want to go after organized crime, corrupt organizations, go after the money. You go after the money with a RICO statute or the equivalent thereof. You go after the money with a money laundering statute, and I know Sweden has a money laundering statute. You go after the money with penalties and enhanced penalties, potential parole and eligibility. And look, I want to be mindful of your culture. I understand that your criminal justice system is based upon the concept of rehabilitation. But this is what I also know. You need to arm your police. You need to arm your prosecutors with the effective tools, and this is a legislative fix, and effective tools to infiltrate corrupt organizations, organized crime organizations, and move up. As Eric, sorry, I called you Jack, Eric told me, we talked about. I think by me, actually. Right? So that's an important thing to understand, right, from a global concept, as well as the mutual interest that both the police department and you all have. Because what comes with organized crime? What comes with corrupt organizations? Extortion, threats, homicide, taxes, not in the form of taxes to the government, a security tax that you have to pay to individuals because usually it's based upon geography. What does also an organized crime and traditional OC? They're compartmentalized. They're compartmentalized for a reason. It's a concept. The RICO statute, all of the conspiracy statute associated with RICO is designed to take how OC has traditionally been, OC being organized crime, traditionally been compartmentalized, and use effective tools to infiltrate and take down corrupt organizations. So let me give you an example by way of what I'm talking about with a legislative fix, potentially. I'm a state prosecutor. I've been a state prosecutor for 27 years before I retired last year. In the state of New Jersey, and I'm going to talk about money laundering specifically, money laundering. Over $500,000 money laundering statute is a first-degree crime. Sentencing range for a first-degree crime is between 10 and 20 years. The legislature put in place parole and eligibility requirements, which means what? That a defendant, before they're eligible for release, has to serve between 1/3 and 1/2 of the time. That's potentially a 20-10. Consecutive, meaning in addition to whatever underlying offense took place that formed the basis of the money laundering charge. Your money laundering law, as currently written, is the sentencing range between 6 months and 6 years. The mindset of a criminal in organized crime is the cost of doing business. A cost of doing business. I'm doing a mathematical calculation. I'm going to Jersey it up for a minute. I'll be a stand-up guy. That means I'll do my time. And I'm doing a calculation of being 3 years or 4 years or 6 months is a whole heck of a lot more palatable than a 20-10 consecutive on anything else, just on the money laundering charge alone. Our presentation on RICO, and I think you have the entire presentation if you're interested in that, the PowerPoints, I believe, has been handed to you. But the other penalties associated with this, with a RICO charge, is the underlying offense. That means if there's a RICO and there's a homicide plan, even if the homicide doesn't take place, you're looking at 30 to life on the RICO charge. These are powerful tools, as Eric talked about, that prosecutors can bear on potential defendants to become cooperators. No cooperator, in my experience, and probably Eric's experience, has done so out of the goodness of their heart. They just don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. They do it because they have no other options. And in order to get serious, respectfully, and taking down, I know the colonel showed the actual graph, right, before, and he highlighted that we were going to highlight this. It's all scattered all over the place. Probably if the colonel showed the graph in 85, it would be pretty well structured. That's the effect, the devastating effect that a tool like this has on organized crime. Other things with regards, and this is just the top 10, and really the importance of that proactive engagement between the chamber, the business community, and the police, because you have mutual interests here. Mutual interests here. You have a beautiful city. I love walking around your city. First time actually in Europe for me. I picked the best place to come, obviously. Right? But you don't want a city where people are fearful of crime, as I think you shared in Detroit. I'm happy you made it out, sir, in your experience with Detroit, knowing what the crime rates are in Detroit, right? Those statistics that the colonel showed you with crime and violent crime, we don't want that happening. What does that mean? It's not too late for two really important groups, the business community and the police community, to work together on the legislative fix. That also appreciates your culture. That's that philosophical debate that you're going to be having as you move forward in trying to tackle this issue that you have. RICO can be a possible scenario. So that money laundering statute I talked about as well, and bolstering those offenses and those theft offenses. Going after the enterprises from a police concept, going after, instead of an individual, we are going to now think more globally. And that global effect is going after the enterprises. I worked with Colonel Fuentes when I was with the colonel with the New Jersey State Police. When we had organized crime cases, there were two really important people that we briefed on a monthly basis. The colonel of the New Jersey State Police, the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey. All of our cases were priority cases. Went right up to the top. So everyone is on board and understand what we're doing. And it also puts the feet to the fire that these things don't take forever. With this, however, is setting up appropriate guardrails, because these tools are very powerful. We don't want prosecutors to overuse, misuse, overcharge. And so within that, actually setting up the guardrails within your prosecuting community, within your police community, to ensure that it is not being misused. With great power comes great responsibility. With us, those approvals went all the way up to the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey. As a deputy director, I didn't even have the authority to approve a RICO case. That went right to the AG for that final approval. And setting up those appropriate parameters and those guardrails to ensure, because the one thing you do, you're going to work, if you get a legislative fix, you're going to work real hard to get this. The last thing you want is it being taken away because it's misused. So you want to set up those parameters in place as well, and those guardrails with regards to RICO. I know the great debate with penalties as deterrents, penalties, the effective penalties. And I just described to you the on the ground, boots on the ground, lawyer to lawyer, prosecutor to defense attorney conversation that happens every Monday or every plea negotiation with regards to cooperation. Time. And that time with regards to potential substantial jail times for those individuals that do that. With the money laundering statute that you currently have, a lot of it's based upon violent crimes, adding potentially economic crimes to within the mix to form a basis of. Your mail frauds, your wire frauds, or the equivalent thereof can form a basis of your money laundering charge. Cooperation agreements, arming prosecutors to get them to flip, guardrails, with regards to this, and Eric talked upon this. This is really important. We're not talking about just La Cosa Nostra. We're not talking about the traditional, 5 families that you would see in the boroughs in New York that I'm sure you studied if you studied OC. This is an effective tool that can be used at street-level crime activity, street gangs specifically. We've used it in political corruption cases when we can prove it and have the sufficient predication. So what Eric and I talked about was not specific getting into the law school, this is what RICO is, this is that, this is this. Because we have such a broad array here, we wanted you to understand how an effective RICO statute legally can arm your police and your prosecutors, and oh, by the way, they got work too, because they're gonna have to learn to work together, prosecutors, detectives, forming units specifically designed for this, if they don't already exist, specifically trained to deal with this, and run a vertical prosecution straight up. So we're talking about a shift, potentially, from the police, prosecutors, but also arming them with the tools. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Robert. In fact, this was so interesting that I will go online and see whether I can actually sign up for one of your law school classes.
Time.
We will now move a little bit further up north from the US to Canada, because we can learn a lot from Canada as well in this regard. Matt Peggs is Division Criminal Operations Officer for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and since 2018, he has been serving as Chief Superintendent. He will give us some insight into the Canadian approach to disrupt organized crime. A big round of applause to Matt Peggs. Thank you.
You guys didn't even finish your presentation. I don't know any of this. There we go. So thank you very much for having me today, and thank you very much for my time in Sweden this far. It's a wonderful country, wonderful city, and everyone's been very welcoming. So I think before I'm going to speak to my piece, which is organized crime in Canada, federal policing in Canada, I think it would be helpful for everyone just to have a bit of an idea of the landscape of Canada and kind of the diversity we have as a country and in policing as well. So the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, my organization, is the National Police Force of Canada. So we look after the federal policing, so the crime that crosses the borders and the crime that affects the country as a nation. We also, in certain provinces, are the provincial police, and in some cases, we police some of the cities as well. But for the most part, all of the large cities in Canada have their own police forces, and Ontario, Quebec, and Newfoundland have their own provincial police as well. So in total, we have 137 municipal police services in the country. We have 4 different provincial police services. We have 36 Indigenous Canadian police services and a total of 670 RCMP detachments around the country. The challenge for policing for us is we are such a diverse country, from the far north to the kind of the laid back West Coast to the Maritimes. And, nous sommes un pays avec deux langues. So we have one whole province which their primary language is French. And so our policing policies, certainly for the RCMP, have to be ones that can serve everything all at once, which is a challenge. When it comes to organized crime, our experience has been, although the centers of organized crime are in the big cities, they have tentacles into all of the small towns as well. So when we talk about organized crime, similar to what my colleagues said before me, it's not simply the traditional organized crime that you think about. It's many different groups, and they touch entire countries, even into the small towns. So the idea of cooperation and communication is so important, so that information, like we've heard this morning, is shared with everyone that needs to understand it. So each of the provinces and territories that we have has a criminal intelligence bureau that all collect together into the Criminal Intelligence Bureau of Canada, so the information is shared. The one interesting thing about our justice system is we have one criminal code for the whole country. but our Constitution has downloaded the administration of justice into each of the provinces. So each of the provinces runs its own justice system based on the same criminal code, but each one is its own thing. So that requires different jurisdictions for the legal landscape and for the paperwork and arrest warrants and things like that. So ours is very much based on a lot of cooperation and a lot of communication that comes back and forth. As a result of that, one of the best practices that we've seen for fighting organized crime is the idea of joint units that will have the involvement of prosecution from the beginning, as well as the various police services that might service an area. So I think pretty much everywhere across the country, there is a major joint forces unit built up of multiple police services that go after organized crime so that the information is shared. Criminals don't know boundaries. The boundaries that are on the map were created by us, whether it's in a city or whether it's in a country. They matter to us for administration and for jurisdictions. It doesn't matter. And in today's world, it doesn't even matter which country you're in. There's a lot of movement around as well. So a lot of what we have. So the RCMP also has people stationed in 32 countries around the world. The idea is we assist law enforcement all over Canada, not just the RCMP, with issues that affect Canada. So we have liaison officers in all those locations. The liaison officer for Sweden is out of The Hague, and we also have participation in Interpol and Europol as well to look after Canadian interests, but also to participate and contribute to the international law enforcement community. So what I'm going to talk about today is just the idea of federal policing. I won't touch on some of that's the area that I work in now, and Canada has many very capable municipal police services, and I don't want to cut their grass necessarily, so I will just talk about federal policing in the RCMP, which basically falls under 3 categories, all of which have an element to organized crime to it. So national security investigations, transnational serious and organized crime investigations, and cybercrime investigations. I think those are the ones that I think every country is struggling with them. So I'm only going to touch briefly on the national security piece. Generally speaking, similar to what my colleague said before me, it's not based on profit. It's based on ideology, I'll say, but it requires money. Transnational organized crime, the whole purpose of it is to make money. Cybercrime, generally speaking, I would say it's for profit also, although there is some state-sponsored cybercrime that's more planned to be disruptive more than a moneymaker. So each of these themes is heavily influenced by the increasing transnational nature of crime, how we have to keep evolving and we have to keep developing our own people to deal with the fact that it's not just within our country anymore, and it's not just within one little jurisdiction, it transfers over all of it. So in the world of national security for us, that means 2 different things. It means terrorism, and it means foreign actor interference activities. So for me on this, with this slide, I think the key, again, and it's a bit of a theme I'm seeing here, is cooperation. Both of these matters go beyond the borders of any one country. Both of them have an international component to them and a domestic component to them. And whatever you do in one space can affect normal other people in ways that we're not even sure about. So that communication is the key. For us, we have a robust kind of governance structure over our national security activities. So all the information that flows in and out goes through one central location so that everyone knows what's going on with the investigations and information's not going out that could jeopardize something else that we have going on. One part of the national security piece is national critical infrastructure. So the things that are important to us as a country, power plants, bridges, hospitals, certain things that if they were to have an issue happen to them, whether it be a cyber attack or whether it be a physical attack, would jeopardize the security of the nation. And that takes a lot of partnership with private industry in order to produce this. We have a large committee that is set up in which we pass on information to the private sector about threats that we are hearing information about, and they then pass information on to us as well of their own personal security, of their own organization. And it's that public-private partnership, that the idea that the police couldn't do it alone without that cooperation to assist. We talk about the serious and organized crime piece. I think we can break that down into three things. One is the idea of the organized crime. It's the movement of illicit commodities, proceeds of crime, drug trafficking, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, interprovincial or international. I'll include in there, in the organized crime piece, stock market manipulation. We have units as well that look into the stock market piece because it's increasingly being used by organized crime as a way to launder their money. And for this audience here, we do have partnerships with the private sector in the stock market as well. That is where the expertise is. The police know so much about it, but certainly people in the industry have an expertise in that area. So one thing we've started doing is utilizing experts from the private sector, from the business community, to help give our investigators some advice and some training so they understand better of what they're looking at. We do the same thing in money laundering investigations with the utilization of private industry, of experts to assist the police in going after money laundering. I could not agree more with my colleagues that spoke before me. Going after the proceeds of crime, going after the money that is made is often the best way to attack this. Organized crime exists to make money. And if you can take away the incentive of the money making, often you can help disrupt that crime. And I agree with it that I think that is the best way of going after it. Border integrity is our catch-all for the work that we do between the ports of entry to try and stop illicit goods and crime at our borders. So speaking about cybercrime, we've broken into two things. The one is kind of using the organized crime, trying to make money off of the cyber world, versus organized crime influenced by foreign states interfering with Canada. This, again, I think there is a large need for strong relationships with the private sector. The police cannot keep up with the advancements in cybercrime. We need help from academia, we need help from the private sectors, and we are starting to shift more and more to bringing civilians into the police units that have the expertise in order that we can better combat this. There's very much an international community of practice with cybercrime in which all of the cybercrime investigative units seem to have they communicate back and forth in order that they can identify trends and other investigative techniques that have worked one place. Very much, I would say, it is organized crime, cybercrime. Not the traditional organized crime that you think of, but it's very much of a better profit activity with very little risk because you don't physically have to be present in order to make the money. You can do it from a distance. So our legislation, we have about 2,000 organized crime groups operating in Canada. They have links to 77 different countries and across the country. We too, similar to the United States, have some specific legislation to organized crime. Ours is the participation in a criminal organization, which is a piece of legislation, it's a charge. What the elements of that charge is that the organization must be comprised of 3 or more individuals, either inside or outside of Canada, and must have one of its main purposes the facilitation of 1 or more serious offenses, which is an offense that you could get more than 5 years in jail for, that would garner some material benefit. This is a challenge to prove. It takes many of the same investigate techniques that my colleagues talked about before with respect to electronic surveillance, wiretapping, surveillance, covert operations, the use of human sources in order to get there. It's a challenge to prove. It's a large undertaking by police, but very much if it's done correctly, you can dismantle whole organizations using this. In order to help us with this, the government did give us some extra powers when they put this in place. That charge alone, on top of any other things, is punishment of up to 14 years in prison. And they gave us some extra allowance on the length of time that we could do a wiretap for, as opposed to just 60 days, which is our current limit. We now can go up to 6 months looking at criminal organizations. Everything that we do with respect to police law must be in compliance with our Charter and Rights of Freedoms, which is the overarching piece of legislation that kind of, I guess the best way to put it would be that governs how we do the investigations with respect to the search and seizure of things, the arrest and detention of people, and any breach of that charter can have the whole case thrown out. So we're very conscious to make sure that does not happen. Just touching on the specifics of cybercrime again, we kind of look at it as two ways. Technology as a target, so using that malicious software to access computer systems, hacking to steal sensitive data, or denial of service attacks, or technology as an instrument, which would be the online scams, the illicit marketplaces, things like that. We recently did a project, a cybercrime project with our friends to the south on a NetWalker ransomware matter, in which this individual from operating out of Quebec had done 60 attacks on various different countries. And we went out and we had the results of where the money had come from. We went forward to businesses to identify, were you attacked here? And a lot of them did not even know it, that there'd either been an attempt or something had happened. Out of that one, we ended up seizing $45 million worth of Bitcoin that had come from ransomware attacks. And most of them, the attempts had never been reported. And most of the time, the ransomware, they had just paid the ransom and had never reported it to police either. This individual has since been extradited to the United States, where they'll deal with their matters down there as well. So it's an ever-changing thing, but I think the theme that I see with respect to organized crime is the money that is made. And when you have the money, you're only making money because you want to enjoy the money. And so then it's used by the business, it's used through the business community to either get it back into bank accounts or to utilize the money. And when you follow the money, as my friends have said, that is a way that you can see the crime, and it's a great way to disrupt and a great way to identify the networks. And I think the themes of cooperation, information sharing, the use of technology are the things that we need to look at going forward in order to deal with organized crime issues. So, and finally, as I have 2 minutes left, this is really how everyone knows us. Hardly any of us do this. We have the uniforms to wear on special occasions, but that's about it. But it's absolutely been a pleasure to be here over this time. I believe our organized crime situation is very similar to the United States, perhaps not as extreme, but quite similar. If we go back to the original slide, and I should have mentioned it, one interesting fact is within 200 kilometers of the US border is where the vast majority of the population of Canada is. We have giant pockets of land where there's no one living. And so we've learned a lot from the Americans. Our legislation, a lot of it is based on what they have done. There's a lot of similarities between the two. We work very closely with them. And so their experiences, we've learned from them. And I hope from this visit that perhaps you can learn from their country and our country and put some things in place that can benefit Sweden as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. And you described eloquently some of the similarities with the US approach. What are the differences?
I think there's some very technical differences in the way that they use some of their information that they can get from some of the cooperators that they talk about. We do the same thing. There's just some difference in the legal system and the way that they are able to use the information that comes from some of their cooperators in their investigations.
And if we put a Canadian spin on RICO,
Yeah.
Do you have a Canadian RICO version, or would you like to have one, or do you have your own thing?
That our version of RICO is that participation in a criminal organization section of our criminal code. They haven't, it's not as defined as much as RICO is, but it's basically the same that looks at outside of other offenses. There is this offense for participating in a criminal organization. And the same tools that are used to get that evidence, such as the wiretapping, the surveillance, and the use of either cooperators or other undercover techniques is basically the same.
And does it work the way it is intended and the way you would wish, or would like to see some revisions, additional things going into legislation?
No, I think I'm satisfied with the way that it's written. It is a challenge to get the evidence that's needed to meet there, but as similar to what my colleague said too, these are major tools. This is a major tool that's taking on an important criminal organization, and it shouldn't be something that's really easy. It should be something that has checks and balances, and the police should take the efforts to get it right. So no, I'm satisfied with what we have.
Thank you, Matt. A big round of applause.
Thank you.
And by now, you know Paul and Jack, but I also like to take the opportunity to introduce Chief Marwin Ben Hyman, who's the Chief of Staff of the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and the Executive Director of its Professional Development Bureau. And Paul and Ben and Jack will come up in a second to wrap up the first segment of this very interesting day that we spend here together to learn more about security and safety and how to actually promote security and safety. So a big round of applause again to Ben, Paul, and Jack. Welcome up. And the emphasis here on this discussion and your presentation will be community, business community, and the role of the business community in fighting crime, basically.
That's correct. So really, this is kind of, this is the culmination of everything you heard today. So what you heard today, you got a lesson in policing and how we operate in North America, how we have leveraged those laws, but it's not going to be done without the legislature and without the parliament, because they have to support these efforts or it's not going to happen. The police can only do and act with the tools that they are provided with. That's it. Unless the business community and the legislators come together to work together to develop these tools, then we're never going to get to the next step. And I'm going to be very candid with you. As long as we ponder and think about it, the street is not pondering or thinking about anything. They're moving and they're acting. And you know what? They're entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs. And we have to be better entrepreneurs. So this is really about public-private partnerships. We don't have that much time, and this is really what it's about. So I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly and then leave behind with Andreas the PowerPoint for further discussion. This is a business case. You're business people. Even our police are business people in some context, right? It's a business case for building public-private partnerships in Sweden. Johan knows Ken. Ken knows Sarah. Sarah knows Hannah. That's how relationships have worked over the years. We have a new police chief, a police commissioner in Uppsala or Gothenburg or Stockholm, and the business community makes a great relationship, and the way things are in life, people move on. This is about formalizing, institutionalizing. This is about building ways and processes for a continuum that if Andreas or the chief leaves in 5, 10, 15 years, whatever, this is going to leave legacy. Nothing is going to happen unless there's legacy. So we chose those words carefully. This is a business case for P3, public-private networking, but formalizing that networking, not just a phone call anymore, not just a meeting anymore, and we all go back to doing what we're doing. There has to be a formalized process. I don't know how many corporations or if information, and I'm not asking, but if information flows through the chamber that's cybersecurity related, where cybersecurity alerts can get out to every business in Stockholm. And by the way, not just the Volvos of the world, not just the IKEAs of the world or the Ericssons of the world, but the small business owner down the street that could potentially become victim of a malware. And their business closes. And how is that going to impact the chamber? And how is it going to impact the economy? So we're talking about from the top down for information sharing and establishing a process for information sharing. And again, I have to move pretty quickly, but we do have to hit on this. Here's the bottom line. It's about the partnership. So what we're recommending, we don't want to be presumptuous, is the partnerships, of course, between public policing, we'll call it, public policing, chamber, and not just the chamber, but the chambers. I mean, it could be the catalyst for the chambers. We'll move through this pretty quickly. Strengthens public safety and business community. This is an important word. Force multiplier. The business community has the infrastructure. The police, they have the information. Where's it going to go if the two don't cooperate with each other? Okay? Literally. Stakeholders to understand and monitor what transpires within their ecosystem and increased capacity for alerting others to crisis trends. What does that mean? That means if, God forbid, there's a crisis somewhere, it's for instant communication. Everybody's on the same page. That also solves a problem for disinformation. Because if the information is consistent, and if the information comes from a trusted source somewhere either within government or from the chamber or elsewhere, then at least we have a single message. I'm going to tell you, even today in the United States, we have 50,000 networks, and they all give you their own spin on what the news looks like, and people walk away completely confused on an active shooter situation, or do we have a terrorist attack downtown in Stockholm? They need to have a way for messaging to come directly from trusted sources, and that doesn't mean that you're in the police business. It means you're in the information sharing business to make your business stronger, to make your business stronger. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. Public-private interaction in Sweden now is episodic and transactional. That is not a criticism. I'm looking to our police brothers and sisters. That's not a criticism, but that's the way it is. And by the way, that's the way it is around a lot of places. That cannot continue. Not in the current situation that you have now. Everyone says, what do we do? The first thing we do is we formalize the way that we talk to each other. We formalize the way that we share information with each other. And we create force multipliers. Force multipliers means that no one's spying on the street, but it means that there's training programs so people can understand how to respond and behave if there's an emergency on their street, an emergency in their store or in their corporation, and it's done consistently. Strong support from organizational leaders. Organizational leaders would be chamber in this case, or would be national police. Shared leadership and power, and the word power is not to be, and I don't have to even say it, but I will, taken out of context. Power means the power of the organization, the influence of the organization. Benefits to all participants, acceptance and trust, tangible results in crimes prevented or solved. This is the mission. Flexibility to adapt to a changing environment. Rewards for those responsible for the partnership. And here's what we have right now. Here's the good news. I'm singing to the choir is the expression, right? Sweden had the lowest crime rate. Things were good. and quite rapidly, things changed overnight. It's a more complex environment. So you just heard me say this, I'll say it again. The National Police and Security Services have the threat information, and the private sector controls the vulnerable sites. So it's all about process. So law enforcement capacity needs to provide a much more capability to share the knowledge and to share the information rapidly. I'm moving quickly through this because I want to, these are things that I think you already know. I don't have to go through these. So let's talk about the theoretical and experiential arguments. I'd like my colleagues to come in wherever they so desire, because these two gentlemen represent the largest and most proactive policing agencies in the world, NYPD and Metro DC. Jack just recently retired, but he's up to date on everything going on in New York, and Mr. Heyman is considered one of the top experts in public-private capacity building, in addition to running the operations of one of the largest police agencies in the country right now to this day. So do you want to cover through some of this, is the importance of why, and why are these relationships important, and furthermore, how have they benefited the police?
I'm happy to jump in here, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. We could not do what we do as law enforcement in the nation's capital without our business community. Especially in an era of shrinking workforces for law enforcement, our business partners are more important than ever. And that really is on multiple different bases. From direct support, whether it's through things like our police foundation, where our business community really rallies around law enforcement and provides donations to actually equipment and other capacities, to advocacy and support. One of the greatest, I think, pieces of community input comes from our business community through our council, through our elected government. Our business community reflects the interest. They advocate and very concretely speak with members of our elected government on their interests. Often, as law enforcement, we hear from our community, we want more safety here. We need more security here. And the business voice and interest coming directly to elected officials really helps change both legislative initiatives and also policy initiatives. Very concretely, in terms of crime fighting, we rely heavily on our business community for information. In the nation's capital, we have a program called Capitol Shield. This program allows the business community to have cameras installed on the exterior of the property. In DC, there's over 900 cameras, over 250 properties that have these, that allow law enforcement direct access to video footage from the outside perimeter of those properties. And further, we have programs like crime camera rebate programs, allowing any business owner to install cameras and have those cameras subsidized through government reimbursement. That's really important from investigative functions for our longer term investigations and for crimes that occur. Being able to get meaningful video footage where we can, quickly solve crimes, not just relying on what someone saw, but being able to go back. These are just some of the ways that we're seeing the business community really come together and work with law enforcement in the nation's capital.
I think in a number of the initiatives that Ben just spoke about in DC, there are corollaries in New York City. The first one that he had mentioned was the Police Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization that helps support policing in things that we know policing and government can be slow to acquire technologies or slow to move because of budgetary constraints and perhaps even an unwillingness to test new technologies, or though that philanthropic organization which supports the police locally was actually among the first to buy bullet-resistant vests for policing. In fact, in the 1980s, when bulletproof vests became a standard issue for the New York City Police Department, it was the Police Foundation that bought those vests and distributed them to police officers. an interesting note, John Lennon from the Beatles was one of the people that helped contribute the money to fund that initiative. And when we speak about cameras, we leverage partnerships with business community in the central business district of Lower Manhattan and in Midtown, where we co-locate for legal purposes and for preservation of ownership purposes, who sits in those facilities, but also leaves the ownership of the video data and the video systems to the businesses. But they are co-located so that law enforcement can actually have eyes on what's being seen by those who operate those camera systems in the city, even though it's business that owns them and runs them. So that's another example. And then the last I would say is a partnership that it may have the same name, but it does something different. It's a NYPD Shield. It was a program that came out of the experiences of 9/11, where, as you know, it was Lower Manhattan that suffered the greatest consequences, loss of life and the destruction of the World Trade Center complex. Many businesses were displaced and many people obviously lost their lives, but the things that were able to come out of that was, how do you consider cooperation among businesses and law enforcement so that you can be resilient in the face of either catastrophes or emergencies? And SHIELD is that opportunity to have interaction where police share information with the business community about disruptive behaviors, protest activity, and where we hear information back from the business community. There is ongoing, emails on a daily basis, quarterly meetings with business community, the chief security officers that make that relationship really resilient, very powerful, and a long-term investment.
One more piece just to add in. I think one of the areas we've seen the greatest impact with our business community is around training. So our law enforcement agency works very closely with multiple business improvement districts or groups of businesses in various neighborhoods throughout our community to provide training on topics like active shooter. And this is very near and dear to me. This past Friday, we had an active shooter situation. Unfortunately, 4 people were shot. A gunman opened fire outside of a school, shooting over 100 rounds down into kind of a crowd of people. Our business community is a primary source for bringing people together for training. And so we will engage in all sorts of spaces and places with business owners, with their constituencies, to provide training on whether it's active shooter, basic crime prevention type pieces, but rather than law enforcement being the only partner at the table, having business community inviting law enforcement to be there, we've seen great success in terms of both perceptions of safety, but also getting real knowledge for crime prevention into the hands of our residents.
So in the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to actually talk about what it looks like. So I'm going to dive right into what is a P3 and the importance thereof. You just heard 2 really good examples. The P3, which is public-private partnerships, in addition, becomes directly involved in training businesses. And you heard with the SHIELD program in New York City, they're constantly sharing updated information with the communities. So what is it? I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Alliances between one or more government agencies and private corporations to receive a set of goals. So it's to design bid-build structure, bringing in private subject matter experts to provide the expertise, and creating a bi-directional information sharing model used in mitigating crime. The bottom line is none of this is going to happen unless the research is done first. So we have to depend on conducting some real good research to allow us to get to this point. So that really, we're at second or third base, but first base is absolutely unequivocally the research, and you'll see another reference to that. It's real. You have to touch it. You have to feel it. It has to be real. Regularly scheduled business-like meetings with agendas and sharing of useful information. And basically, here's the real. Tangible products, strong leadership, commitment to the executives, the signing of an official MOU between the public safety sector, and the business sector. Inclusion of key stakeholders, knowledgeable and committed SMEs, and as you heard, the identification of training, where training can be provided to the business community. What are the obstacles? We all know there's obstacles. No formal process right now for information sharing. There is none. Corporations do not feel that they receive timely information from the police. Fear that information they provide to the police may end up on social media. These are obstacles. Law enforcement may fear that the corporate sector may not treat the law enforcement information discreetly. We have successfully in Canada and the United States gotten through this. There's processes. It took us 20 years. Your hand grenade attacks were our 9/11. Suggested solutions, overarching benefits are resources to address cyber and technological crime, resources to address financial and intellectual property crime, advanced technologies, and critical incident planning and response. And this, ladies and gentlemen, other than the research, because none of this will happen without that research, information sharing. It's the lifeblood. This has replaced oil. This has replaced gold, because you're not going to survive without the information. Am I right? Establishing an anonymous information sharing capability. That is extremely important. In the United States, we have something called Crime Stoppers. So, Crime Stoppers is this. Provides civil society with a mechanism to anonymously inform the police of criminal activity and offers monetary reward for information leading to that activity. I will tell you that this has solved more crimes in North America than any police force or any security agency, and that's no offense to any police force or security agency. So when we talk about clearance rates for the police or clearance rates for your own businesses, it's establishing anonymity, a process so people can pick up a phone, call, and say, I've got some information. And it's protecting that process. It was just used in New York City. We had a shooter that shot 12 people in the subway. I'm sure you heard of it. It was worldwide news. Do you know how this person was caught? Look, the NYPD has some of the best detectives in the world. They were caught by a Crime Stoppers tip. The business community is locked into this. The chambers are locked into this. 5 tips. So I'll go real quickly through the solutions and the benefits. I think, and again, Ben and Jack already discussed this. Fortifying Swedish enterprise against threats. Swedish business community to facilitate a collaborative environment, fostering cooperation between public and private. These are the benefits to society, and I've got to wrap it up within a minute. And then I'd like Jack and Ben to close. This is the bottom line for what we're proposing. More informed personnel and staff. Engagement of neglected communities as well will benefit. Vulnerable communities will benefit. Reduced public disorder. More resilient and safer communities. Benefits to the government. Increase in public trust. Increase access to crime information, improving investigations. Public participation. Programs and messaging are centralized and streamlined to address disinformation and misinformation. And also government-funded programs to include the public in combating crime. Last but not least, I'll put it last but not least here, creating interested and willing partners. Would you rather be victims or would you rather be empowered partners? What would you rather be? That's your choice. And I would like my esteemed colleagues to close.
So I mentioned briefly some of the successful programs that we had in New York. And it really comes down to the willingness of the business community to lend their voices to support civil society and law enforcement. Some of those conversations that we had post 9/11, and you use that as a catastrophe, as that horrible day and time in New York, as a basis for forming some of the strongest relationships that we had with business. just a minor example of how information sharing and acknowledging the importance of the role of the business community in the recovery of New York, and then some conversations that happened afterwards in order to make the companies more resilient that were kind of shared with the police department, was the need for businesses to get their personnel back into their facilities right after 9/11, whether it was for critical systems rebooting or for acquiring records or whatever else it may have been. We had locked down all of Lower Manhattan. You couldn't get into it, and the business community needed to get to their facilities. So what we came up with was a way to have business executives and their hand-chosen personnel to get identification cards that were recognized by the police and government to let them go past police lines. It was just a minor example of how a catastrophe came up with solutions to help support the business community. And anytime there were, and that those same credentials and that same idea was put into implementation during Superstorm Sandy, when the Lower Manhattan had been flooded out completely. So resiliency and recovery efforts through conversations with business were able to help support some ideas that came to fruition.
Thank you, Ben.
And I know we're right at time, but I'll keep my remarks very brief. I commend everyone for being here today to even engage in this conversation. Before ongoing partnerships can occur, relationships have to start first. And at least for us in DC, having those relationships with our business community has stemmed into numerous partnerships where we've seen dividends in reducing crime throughout our city, and hopefully we'll continue to see that trend. So I want to thank you very much for having us here today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you. If we only have one thing that we need to do, one thing, the business community, in order to help partner up, what should that be?
It has to be a clear and consistent message to elected representatives and to the police leadership that you're there for their support, and that you're willing to be partners in co-creating public safety for the support of the economic resiliency of the country, and obviously for Stockholm in particular. So it's that clear and consistent voice of support.
I would add on to that, and I do agree with my colleague, but I would say creating spaces and places for law enforcement to engage with the business community. You as the business community know best what those spaces are. Create the opportunity for law enforcement to be present, law enforcement to share the challenges, and then work together collaboratively on solutions.
Well, thank you so much, and a big round of applause to Ben, Paul, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you, Anders.
And following up on Ben's recommendation here to create spaces and places to engage, we will now, for the remaining part of our day together, move over to the Swedish context. And I will actually switch over to Swedish, but our English-speaking friends will have the opportunity to listen in and get the discussions translated in real time. Så, då byter vi till svenska. Det har varit otroligt intressant. Vi kommer att ha nu 2 stycken paneldiskussioner som för en del av insikterna, en del av vad vi har lärt oss här idag till en svensk kontext. Hans Irman, vice chefsåklagare hos Åklagarmyndigheten, välkommen upp. Du är polisöverintendent på nationella operativa avdelningen. Välkommen du också.
Tack.
Och Thomas Andersson, Vice President, Volvo Car Group. Välkommen.
Tackar.
Ni är alla varmt välkomna, och ni har ju lyssnat in på... jag ställer mig här borta. Ni har lyssnat in på diskussionerna och presentationerna. Hans, jag börjar med dig. Du är ju vice chefsåklagare vid nationella åklagaravdelningen, verksam också vid riksenheten för säkerhetsmål. mer än 23 års erfarenhet som operativ åklagare kring frågor om organiserad brottslighet, landets säkerhet. Hur ser du på den situationen vi har idag, 2022, vad gäller organiserad brottslighet och situationen som vi möter egentligen?
Ja, för att vara väldigt kortfattad och summerad så är läget till skillnad mot tidigare kan man väl beskriva det som att den grova organiserade brottsligheten är mer affärsmässig och global än tidigare. Den är sammanflätad med extremistmiljöer på ett helt annat sätt än vad vi har sett tidigare. Det vill säga alltså grovt kriminella, yrkeskriminella grupper och extremister startar företag, bedriver verksamhet i företag för att finansiera sin och fortsätta sin illegala verksamhet. Och det är väl ett, om man ska tala om trendbrott, att det är mycket typiskt att kunna iaktta idag.
Och det är ett trendbrott vad gäller strukturen och organisationen kring brottsligheten. Men ser du trendbrott också i brottens natur?
Ja, alltså det här är ju då brott då som begås i en företagsmiljö, och det görs då genom det är penningtvätt. Det kanske tydligaste exemplet är just penningförmedlingsverksamheten som florerar och där vi gång på gång ser hur grovt kriminella och extremister utnyttjar företag för att finansiera och upprätthålla sin illegala verksamhet. Så att penningtvättsbrotten, den typen av hantering av kontanter, kriminella brottspengar är ju någonting som ökar. Det är ingenting nytt, men det ökar ju och det sker betydligt mer strukturerat och affärsmässigt än tidigare. Sen så är det ju, kan man väl säga att det är svårt att dra alla över en kam, utan när det gäller då de mindre småföretagare så ser vi då att det som ökar det är utpressning, bedrägerier och liknande. Medan då företag som bedriver forskning kring högteknologi, de utsätts ju då för en annan typ av brott. Och det är ju många gånger från statliga aktörer, och då är det främst olika former av dataintrång för att komma över information som man då vill tillägna sig på olika sätt.
Men då hör vi dig konstatera att organisationen kring brott har förändrats, det är trendbrott. Naturen i brottens art har också ändrats. Varför sker de här förändringarna och trendbrotten?
Ja, dels, det här är ju framväxten av en parallell samhällsordning som vi kan konstatera i Sverige. Att det är då grupper som på olika sätt då tillhandahåller en alternativ samhällsordning och tillhandahåller då alternativa system för ekonomi och rättsskipning. Och det blir en samhällsordning med helt andra normer än de som gäller i övrigt i Sverige. Det här gör då att man tillhandahåller då ekonomiska tjänster exempelvis då som ett bättre alternativ.
Per, jag vänder mig till dig. NOA, nationella operativa avdelningen, och du har lång erfarenhet av polisiärt arbete. Först, vad är NOA? Vad är ett syfte? Vad är ett uppdrag? Kan du berätta kort?
Det kan jag göra, och det blir kort. NOA är den nationella avdelningen i Sverige. Vi sysslar ju med den brottsligheten som i huvudsak är nationell och har internationella kopplingar. Vi har ju då typiskt sett alla då, förutsättningar, kompetens för att ta hand om detta. På NOA bedriver vi också utvecklingsverksamhet, och det är allt från hur polisbilarna ska se ut och utrustas till hur vi ska hantera den allra värsta och grövsta brottsligheten. Det som är nytt nu på NOA från i höst här, det är då den enheten som jag då förestår som sysslar med myndighetssamverkan. Vi har försökt liksom att nu lyfta in och se i en helhet på hur vi ska hantera och organisera brottslighet. Inte bara jobba polis och åklagare. Och därför är vi nu speciellt en enhet där vi jobbar i, jag tror det är 4 formella liksom beslutade organ. Allt från satsningen mot den organiserade brottsligheten, satsningen mot arbetslivskriminalitet, där vi jobbar 25-30 myndigheter tillsammans. Och jag tror liksom att det är en väg som jag hör idag. Jag gillar det här pratet om samarbete. Jag tror också att vi måste utveckla vår förmåga att samarbeta i hela samhället. Att inte prata om polisutveckling utan att väldigt mycket prata om brottsbekämpningsutveckling. Och vi sitter ju idag i 8 stycken underrättelsecenter i Sverige tillsammans med 11 andra myndigheter. Vi sitter med Skatteverket, Försäkringskassan, Arbetsförmedlingen och andra och byter underrättelseinformation med varandra på ett sätt som inte har gjorts innan.
Vi har ju levt 2 år med pandemi där en väldigt stor del av befolkningen, eller känns det som i alla fall när man är på sociala medier, blev snabbt experter på epidemiologi. Under påskhelgen så blev väldigt många helt plötsligt experter på polisiärt arbete. Men med det sagt, och Handelskammaren, vad vi gör, alltså vårt syfte är ju att sprida kunskap, vara en mötesplats, främja insikter, partnerskap och samverkan. Så vi hävdar inte på något sätt att vi vet, och det är därför ni är här. Men om vi tittar på upploppen under påskhelgen, vissa har ju då hävdat att det här är tecken på nya trender och nya aspekter. Jag vet inte, vi vet inte. En öppen fråga till dig. Hur nytt är det här och hur allvarligt ska man se på, så att säga, upploppen som något slags trendskifte?
Det är inte jättenytt. Det har hänt förut. Vi var väl förberedda. Vi var väl medvetna om att det skulle bli oroligheter. Och polisen hade förberett sig och utmaningen var att det var på så många orter nära inpå varandra i tid. Men vi var väl förberedda på det. Det vi inte var förberedda, som vi inte har sett tidigare, det är det våldet som polismännen... Alltså vi fick ju retirera för våra liv ute på de här platserna. Och ni som har sett filmer, och jag har sett några till, man var ute för att döda poliser. Alltså det var ingen tvekan om det. Och det våldet har vi inte mött tidigare och var inte riktigt förberedda när det hände, att det hände. Sen kan man spekulera i varför. Det är bekymmersamt, tycker vi, att det skedde på alla orterna ungefär på samma sätt. Man uppträdde på ungefär på samma sätt och det tyder ju på att man har inspirerats på något sätt från något eller några till att agera unisont, resolut och samtidigt på precis samma sätt på så många orter.
De var inspirerade, men var de organiserade?
Den håller vi på att utvärdera. Vi kan ju se på bilder och vittnesmål från poliser att det är några som har lett och visat och pekat och skrikit, men hur organiserat det här är, det sitter vi just nu och försöker lägga en bild på. Och sociala medier har nämnts nu noterar vi också har haft en betydelse i förberedelserna för de här upploppen.
Det är precis det jag menar, att nu är det poliser vi pratar som är drabbade. Men man måste komma ihåg att det är liksom alla medborgare som drabbas av det här. Alla företagare, alla enskilda medborgare. Det är precis det här som naggar i kanten och som skadar tilltron till samhällsförmåga att skydda, tillhandahålla våra rättigheter som är bland annat trygghet och säkerhet. Och varje gång det här sker så naggas det här i kanten ytterligare. Och det är det som samhället, alla vi som finns här, måste bidra till att återupprätta den här tilltron. Därför den är på väg, det är ett sluttande plan. Och de unga som ser effekten av det här påverkas såklart i en negativ riktning av det här. Och tvekan uppstår, klarar samhället att tillhandahålla trygghet och säkerhet i vardagen? Oavsett om man går i skolan eller om man driver en tobaksbutik. Och det är det som är det stora problemet som man måste ta på allvar. Att stoppa det här på något sätt och återuppta den här kampen. Så det är inte bara mot brottslighet utan det är mot hela tilltron till samhällsförmåga.
Thomas Andersson, Volvo Cars Göteborg. Du är här på Stockholms Handelskammare, men vi bryr oss ju knappast bara om Stockholm. Vi är lika måna om städer som fenomen och att vi ska ha förutsättningar på plats som främjar alla stadsregioners utveckling och faktiskt hela landet. Men du är också ansvarig för då den så kallade Göteborgsmobiliseringen. Ja, kan du berätta om den? Vad är Göteborgsmobiliseringen?
Det kan jag göra, tack så mycket. Jo, vi har ju alltid, vi är Sveriges den största privata arbetsgivare. Och i Göteborg har vi naturligtvis en väldigt stor del av våra anställda. Och därmed speglar vi samhället och vi påverkas naturligtvis av det också. Och vi har alltid haft en god relation med staden och regionen. Men på senare år så har vi intensifierat det. Och jag ska inte sticka under stol med att det är klart att när det sker skjutningar i Göteborg eller i Sverige, då blir det en lednings- och en styrelsefråga för Volvo Cars. Det säger sig självt. Vi är måna om våra anställda och vi är måna om att kunna rekrytera över hela världen. Och läser man fel saker i tidningarna om Sverige och Göteborg så är det inte bra för oss. Men så vad vi bestämde oss för, det var väl att ha ett brett anslag till att skapa, att kunna engagera oss i staden och regionen vad gäller både trygghet och attraktivitet. Så vårt anslag har hela tiden varit att det handlar om att skapa en attraktiv plats som är bra för våra anställda och de vi vill rekrytera. Och så handlar det också om långsiktig kompetensförsörjning. Det finns en väldigt stor så kallad arbetsmarknadsreserv i bland annat de utsatta områdena i Göteborg och över hela Sverige. Det är viktigt för oss att nå ut till de talangerna som finns där. Att erbjuda sommarjobb, extrajobb, fast anställning, kanske hjälpa till med att starta företag etc. Så att det är bakgrunden. Vi vill också engagera oss för att inte, som vår vd sa, Håkan Samuelsson, vi vill inte stå och gnälla utan vi vill engagera oss och därmed ta ett ansvar.
Den här mobiliseringen, Thomas, är ju fantastisk. Men du nämnde också att en del av uppsåtet var just kanske då, om jag tolkar dig rätt, en liten gnagande oro för möjligheterna att faktiskt kanske rekrytera Sveriges varumärke kopplat till Volvo Cars. Har ni sett konkreta exempel på där så att det som sker i samhället påverkar er negativt?
Ja, men det kommer ju upp naturligtvis i samtal med de vi vill rekrytera. Det är ju det första man frågar om man ska flytta från andra sidan jorden till Göteborg. Så vill man veta att det finns bra bostäder, bra skolor, att det är tryggt för familjen. Så det kommer naturligtvis upp. Hur mycket det påverkar och hur konkret det påverkar är jättesvårt att bedöma, men absolut så har det en påverkan och det måste vi ta på största allvar.
Per, den här fantastiska Göteborgs mobiliseringen handlar ju om partnerskap. Partnerskap för ett nytt slags ledarskap som är otroligt inspirerande. Men hur viktigt tror du att de här typen av nya samverkansformer är för det polisiära arbetet? Är det överhuvudtaget relevant?
Nej, jag tror det är enda vägen. Det är den här vägen vi måste gå. Vi måste sluta prata om att alla ska hjälpa polisen, utan vi måste börja prata om att samhället, alltså det är Sverige AB som står på spel. Det är inte polisens arbete som ska stödjas. Och den biten tror jag är otroligt viktigt. Det är viktigt för myndigheter att liksom se det i en helhet, hålla sin del av fronten i alla frågor, byta information med varandra. Och det är viktigt att även kontakta alltså näringslivet. Vi har ju ett nytt uppdrag nu där vi sitter med arbetslivskriminalitet, det är ett nytt modord, om ni säkert har hört innan, där vi tittar på företagsamhet i Sverige. Och nu bygger vi 7 stycken sådana här regionala center för att agera mot den tillsammans med 9 myndigheter. Och där har vi också diskussioner med parterna och Svenskt Näringsliv med flera. Så att jag tror att detta är enda vägen. Polisen klarar inte detta själva. All brottslighet går inte att utreda, utan vi måste försöka stoppa så mycket som möjligt av den som pågår. Det har pratats tidigare om pengarna i drivkraft. Ja, det håller jag helt med om. Och vi försöker väldigt mycket gå från mindsetet nu att go for the money till go before the money. Så att förhindra att pengarna betalas ut i mycket större utsträckning. Det är otroligt tidsödande och arbetskrävande att leta efter stulna pengar. Utan det är lättare att hitta system och då måste vi samarbeta för att täcka läckor där det läcker.
Också en anledning till Tom Cruise att göra en ny Jerry Maguire-film med ett
kanske
nytt
det,
ja. Trygghet, säkerhet. Varför? Jag menar, på ett sätt är det uppenbart när vi öppnar morgontidningen eller när vi tittar på nyheterna. Men jag måste ändå ställa den här frågan. Hur kommer det sig att när vi pratar med företagsledare, när vi pratar med många av de personer som är här inne i vår ljusgård här på Stockholms Handelskammare idag, så är det är trygghet och säkerhet som är där uppe bland de viktigaste frågorna. Vid sidan av mycket annat som vi i näringslivet har tyckt har varit viktigt länge. Men det här har snabbt blivit en av de mest prioriterade frågorna. Hur kommer det sig?
Det är väl Maslows behovspyramid. Du måste börja i botten och etablera en sund bas innan man kan nå självförverkligande på toppen, om man säger så då. Så att det handlar väldigt mycket om att skapa en trygghet. Utan det så i näringslivet, vi är beroende av att vi har medarbetare som mår bra och presterar väl, och i dess förlängning också med våra underleverantörer, våra kunder. Det är ett helt ekosystem som behöver fungera på ett bra sätt, och rubbas det där i grunden, eller det finns risk för det, då adresserar ju det, eller då påverkar ju det naturligtvis vår affär också.
Hans, hur mycket av den här, så att säga, känslan i näringslivet om att det är bristande trygghet och säkerhet, hur mycket är baserat i reella hot, skulle du säga? Har du sett i din roll att risken för att utsättas för organiserad grov kriminalitet exempelvis, har den risken ökat?
Ja, spontant skulle jag säga ja. Nu är det, när vi pratar företagare, så det är svårt att dra liksom alla över en kam, utan det är såna helt olika storlekar. Vi pratar om tobakisten och vi talar om Volvo eller Ericsson eller något annat företag som bedriver högteknologisk forskning. De företagen, de större företagen som har då produkter som är intressanta för utländska aktörer, de utsätts konstant för olika former av dataintrång. Och där är risken, den finns varje dag. Det sker varje dag det här. Det är frågan om hur mycket man upptäcker och vad man väljer hur man agera. Så det är liksom ingen risk, utan det är någonting som händer hela tiden. Och det är då främmande makt, statliga aktörer, som är då intresserade av våra företags forskning och produkter för att då kunna använda det i samma syfte eller något helt andra syften. Sen har vi då tobakisten, småföretagaren. Där är det då, kanske vi talar mer om en risk. Och det är helt beroende på om man är utlämnad till det här parallella samhällsordningen jag talar om. Eller om man kan förlita sig på svenska institutioner. Och där skulle jag säga att många företagare agerar på helt olika villkor. Helt beroende på i vilket territorium man verkar. Och det tycker jag är en orättvisa som är oerhörd i Sverige. Det ska inte spela någon roll vad jag bedriver min tobaksverksamhet, men det gör det idag.
Per, vad är din bild? Har ni statistik, alltså NOA eller polisen, just vad gäller förekomsten eller prevalensen eller risken att näringsliv och människor i näringslivet utsätts för organiserad brottslighet?
Nej, sån statistik har vi inte lättillgänglig. Den finns ju, men den är inte liksom framtagen på det sättet. Jag tror man måste panorera ut också och se på det här problemet på två sätt. Vi har ett problem som är väldigt påtagligt. Det är när man sitter i kassan på ICA och är rädd. Och det är besvärligt. Alltså det är den jag tror ni hör och vi hör mycket. Och sen har vi där företag utsätts för bedrägerier. Det som jag tycker är mycket, mycket mer allvarligt är när den systematiska organiserade brottsligheten tar sig in. Det vill säga att vi får en osund konkurrens. Man skapar företagsverksamhet där man inte betalar ut löner eller skatter på riktiga sätt. Man kan agera på helt andra villkor, slår ut seriösa företag. Och som vi även ser nu i vissa delar, man infiltrerar företag och tar över delar. Och det här slår ut hela systemet och trovärdigheten för riktiga upphandlingar. Alltså ett helt samhällssystem gungar om vi tillåter den här typen av företagsamhet. Den är jag nog mer bekymrad över egentligen, även om jag har full sympati för tobakisten och ICA-tjejen då, att det är ett bekymmer också. Men det här ser ju vi nu och jobbar med det här arbetslivskriminalitetsuppdraget, hur organiserad brottslighet, oftast internationellt, tar sig in, öppnar företagsverksamhet, vinner upphandlingar för grund av att man inte agerar på liksom lika villkor eller lagliga villkor. Och den tror jag vi behöver jobba en hel del med framåt, den utmaningen.
Thomas, hur ser du på de här frågorna och deras roll inom en bredare hållbarhetskontext? Vi lägger i samhället med rätta, med tanke på klimatkrisen, enorma resurser på att ställa om till ett klimatmässigt hållbart samhälle. Där inte minst ligger ni i framkant och håller på att ställa om hela er flotta till att bli elektrifierad. Behöver vi tänka mer, tror du, eller ligger vi bra till? Ni är ju drivande i Göteborgs mobiliseringen, så det är ju verkligen att visa ledarskap. Men social sammanhållning, trygghet, säkerhet som en del av hela hållbarhetsdiskussionen.
Ja, men, jo, absolut. Jag tror vi i näringslivet måste ju engagera oss, och det handlar ju om att kanske försöka engagera oss där vi kan göra mest nytta. Och var är då det, kan man fråga sig. Och i vårt exempel så har vi startat vad vi kallar för en destination Tynnered. Tynnered är ett utsatt område i Göteborg. Och där vi tillsammans med staden Göteborg genom Business Region Göteborg, Stena Fastigheter och Framtiden-koncernen som är den största allmännyttan i Göteborg. Vi har gått samman i en gruppering och vi jobbar då aktivt för att bidra till en bättre skola, meningsfull fritid, mer arbetstillfällen och stadsutveckling inom alla de områdena. Men det är en relativt liten core group som har kommit samman, som vi sen då, där vi också jobbar då lokalt i det här utsatta området. Och det zonperspektivet tror vi väldigt mycket på. Att kunna fokusera med hjälp inte minst av de fastighetsbolagen som finns lokalt. Och deras kunder är ju de som faktiskt lever och verkar och bor i de här fastigheterna. Och sen då tillsammans med andra ha samma målsättning och kunna jobba tillsammans. Och det ska man inte underskatta, det här lokala samarbetet faktiskt, som sen förhoppningsvis kan skalas vidare till andra områden. Så att jag vet inte om det är fullt svar på frågan. Men
ja, men det är fullt svar på frågan, och jag tycker det är väldigt intressant hur ni tänker lokalt även när det kommer till de här frågorna. Globalt agerande och partnerskap, och också såklart eller lokalt agerande och partnerskap och ett globalt tänk också. Ett stort tack till alla er och en varm applåd till Thomas, Per och Hans. Okay. Nu har vi hört experter, myndigheter, thought leaders globalt sett ge sin syn på de här utmaningarna som vi möter idag. Vi kommer nu att switcha över till att prata med beslutsfattarna. Våra folkvalda politiker, de som vill ha vårt förtroende om bara några månader när det svenska folket går till valurnorna 11 september. Boel Godner, du är kommunstyrelsens ordförande, socialdemokrat i Södertälje. Välkommen upp. Johan Forsell, du är rättspolitisk talesperson för Moderaterna. Välkommen upp. Och Johan Hedin, du är rättspolitisk talesperson för Centerpartiet. En varm applåd. Och varmt välkomna också till er. Jag tänkte ta avstamp i frågan om brottsutvecklingen. Börja med Boel. Du är kommunstyrelsens ordförande, socialdemokrat som jag sa. Vi har sett en negativ brottsutveckling i Sverige och i Stockholm de senaste åren. Särskilt då vad gäller grov brottslighet. Och dödliga skjutvapenvåldet sticker ut. Vi har hört mycket om det här nu under förmiddagen. Och det är också någonting som våra amerikanska och kanadensiska experter tar fasta på i sin analys av Sverige. Men hur har Södertälje och hur har du och ni i Södertälje agerat mot bakgrund av den här utvecklingen?
Ja, tack för att jag fick komma hit. Södertälje är en speciell stad för att vi har varit vi har haft en organiserad brottslighet mycket längre än vad, i alla fall som vi har vetat om, än vad alla andra kommuner i Sverige har haft. Så vi har arbetat mot den och identifierat, jag brukar säga, vi har mycket mer kunskaper om organiserad brottslighet än vad man skulle vilja ha. Men det har vi, och vi har jobbat väldigt tajt med polisen i kommunen. Från början var ju den organiserade brottsligheten i Södertälje, det var narkotikaförsäljning, utpressning, beskyddarverksamhet i krogbranschen, spelklubbar och sådana saker. Medan vi sedan har sett den utvecklas på olika sätt. Vi har kunnat följa hur de, när det blir svårare i de andra branscherna, så går man vidare liksom, och har hittat företag, att bilda företag på olika sätt och bygga upp dem så att man kan lura staten och kommunen på pengar. Ta sig in i privat hemtjänst och lura kommunerna på pengar. Ta sig in i personlig assistans och lura staten och kommunerna på pengar. Så att vi har identifierat den, och så har vi då startat ett otroligt tajt samarbete med polisen som vi har sedan 11 år tillbaka. Och vi har ju också, då är polisens arbete ett, och sen är vårt är framförallt det förebyggande. Jag brukar säga skola. Det är våra 3 största prioriteringar i min kommun. Och det har gått från Sveriges näst lägsta, jag ska inte ljuga, skolresultat till riksgenomsnittet på de här 11 åren. Det är ju en fantastisk utveckling och det bästa förebyggande insatsen. Men också med naturligtvis avhopparverksamhet som vi har tillsammans med polisen, sociala insatsgrupper. Vi har 5 socialsekreterare som har sin arbetsplats på polisstationen. Vi byter information, det pratades väldigt mycket om det här tidigare med våra amerikanska vänner. Och halva grejen är just det att man kan utbyta information med varandra, träffas fysiskt. Och nu pratar jag väldigt mycket här, det kanske inte var meningen, men nu kom jag igång faktiskt. Och då tänkte jag...
Kör på.
Ja, att jag fortsätter, för det är så otroligt mycket saker som vi har strukturerat upp. Ett exempel som är till exempel att inför varje mål och budget så sitter jag med lokala polisområdeschefen och frågar honom, nu är det henne kommer det bli, vad kan kommunen göra för att ert arbete ska bli lättare? Vad ser ni utifrån er synvinkel? Så det har lett till jättemånga förändringar och satsningar i vår budget på fler vuxna i skolan, fler kameror, mer satsning på ökade relationer, fördubblat stöd till, budget till avhopparverksamheten och dylikt. Så jag vill verkligen poängtera det.
För ni har gjort väldigt mycket, men då är ju den brinnande frågan, anser du att ni har gjort tillräckligt?
Ja, men jag tror aldrig man kan säga det. Alltså, vi skakar hand på ett minst 25-årigt samarbete, långsiktigt, för det här var ju så inrotat. Vi har ju parallella samhällen i Södertälje, det finns också i andra kommuner. Men vi jämför ju oss med hur det var mellan 2005 och 2010 när det var mord på öppen gata. Det brann i alla våra stormarknader, i chipspåsar, skolor brändes ner, förskolor brändes ner. Det var bilbränder och upplopp och vakter utanför våra krogar, dörrvakter som tog garderobsavgifter på 100 spänn bara för att gå in och äta på en. Ni vet alla vad allt det där betyder. Så att utvecklingen har ju gått framåt. Så vi ser de här skjutningarna som sker nu. De är ett bakslag i vårt långsiktiga arbete mot den grova organiserade brottsligheten i Södertälje.
Johan Forsell, du är rättspolitisk talsperson för Moderaterna, och det här är ju, som vi alla vet, en otroligt komplex fråga, men du har riktat löpande och svidande kritik mot den förda rättspolitiken, och i en nyligen publicerad debattartikel så kallade du då trygghetspolitiken, den som Socialdemokraterna och Bo Godners parti har fört, för ett kolossalt misslyckande. Vad är det du upplever har misslyckats?
Ja, men först och främst tack för möjligheten att komma hit och prata om de här frågorna. Och jag har väl inte bara riktat kritik, jag har också pekat på en del lösningar. Men det är ju så här att jag misstror ingens intentioner. Det är ju ingen som vill att Sverige ska se ut på det här sättet. Men man kan väl bara konstatera att vi har en situation fortfarande efter alla dessa år, efter alla dessa fördömanden och löften, där man kan säga att det skjuts egentligen varje dag. Häromdagen så var det 3 skjutningar på ett och samma dygn, och det blir notiser. dödsskjutningar som slår rekord, och vi ser ju inga tecken heller på att det här ska mattas av, utan en väldigt kraftig nyrekrytering, ungefär 3 personer om dagen pekar rikspolischefen på. Så att vi är överens om problemet, vi är väl också överens om att det har hänt en hel del saker. Det är klart att lagstiftningen nu är ju inte densamma som för 5 eller 10 eller 15 år sedan, och det är bra. Men poängen är denna, resultaten finns inte där. Utan trots allting som har gjorts så släpar vi fortfarande efter. Och vi har ju sagt att får vi chansen efter valet, då kommer vi att genomföra en rättspolitik med alltså en offensiv mot den organiserade brottsligheten som saknar motstycke i vår historia. Vi kommer göra saker som man aldrig tidigare har gjort. Och det kommer bara inspirerat, inte bara av USA. Jag tycker att RICO-lagstiftningen till exempel är väldigt intressant. Jag har läst den. Men man behöver inte åka egentligen så långt heller, utan man kan även åka till exempel till Danmark för att titta hur de använder sig av just det här gängbegreppet på ett helt annat sätt än vad vi gör i Sverige. I Sverige tenderar vi fortfarande att se det här som enskilda individer snarare än att inse vad det egentligen handlar om. Alltså de här kriminella nätverken är ju att likna vid konglomerat, skulle jag väl säga, väl den bästa företagsekonomiska termen för detta. Stora liksom företag som omsätter enorma summor pengar, och då krävs det också lagstiftning och verktyg därefter. Och där finns det fortfarande, menar jag, väldigt mycket att göra.
Men på vilket sätt då, lite mer konkret, tror du att svenska medborgare och för oss som är i näringslivet skulle märka av den här offensiven om Moderaterna vinner valet efter september?
Men vi kommer att ge rättsväsendet ett antal nya verktyg som inte finns idag. Jag kan ge ett exempel. Vi kommer att göra det förbjudet att delta i ett kriminellt gäng. Det är det inte idag. Regeringen går fram med lagstiftning som förbjuder deltagande i terroristorganisationer. Det är bra, men det är fortfarande inte straffbart att vara med i ett gäng. Det kommer vi att förändra. Vi kommer att ge polisen en hel del nya verktyg kopplat till exempel avlyssning. Encrochat var ju fantastiskt och oerhört många kriminella som kommer bli lagförda på grund av det. Men det är ju inte tack vare den svenska lagstiftningen, utan det är ju tack vare stöd vi har fått av andra länder. Det är hög tid nu att vi kopplar grepp om det här, ser till att skaffa oss den här verktygen på egen hand. Vi kommer att öka antalet poliser och vi kommer också ställa tuffare krav på polismyndigheten att använda de här verktygen, att uppvisa tydliga resultat. Och då är det väl både det här att angripa de kriminella organisationerna i toppen, men också att verka mer lokalt där ute. Det är väldigt få, faktiskt alldeles för få poliser idag som till exempel arbetar i yttre tjänst. Så vi måste göra båda de sakerna samtidigt. Både slå mot de som är allra högst upp, men sen också arbeta mer nära medborgarna där ute. Jag tror det är helt avgörande om man ska liksom hantera den här typen av kriminella gäng. Då kan man inte bara finnas där när det skjuts, om man åker in på blåljus, utan man måste finnas liksom mer löpande där ute, bygga relationer till civilsamhället.
Jag misstänker att Boel också vill komma in, men först ska jag släppa in Johan Hedin. Du är rättspolitisk talesperson för Centern, och när du hör så att säga regeringsföreträdare, socialdemokrater tala om trygghet, säkerhet, och när du hör Johan Forssell och Moderaterna och kanske också andra borgerliga partier tala, vad håller du med om och vad tycker du att Centern har särskiljer sig mer eller mindre?
Till att börja med vill jag tacka för inbjudan att komma hit och tacka också för mycket intressant seminarium. Amerikanerna bidrar med väldigt mycket kunskap till mig och till oss som är oerhört värdefull. Jag ser en brist på ledarskap, inte bara inom rättspolitiken, inom generellt i det svenska samhället, som är för svag på många områden. Man är för undfallen från politiken, och då menar jag liksom inte att man är rädd för att ta i med hårda tag, men man är lite rädd för vissa typer av debatter, och hur man än vrider och vänder på det så har aldrig rättspolitiken varit en socialdemokratisk hemmaplan, så att de har varit lite passiva, och Moderaterna och vi andra har fått ligga på ganska mycket och skapa tryck för att få till förändringar, viktiga reformer som faktiskt har skett. Jag tror att Centerpartiets roll har varit ganska mycket under den här och förra mandatperioden att vara lite grann the voice of reason. För att det blir ganska mycket känslor i den här debatten, och det kan man mycket väl förstå. För att det sker mycket brott där ute som är väldigt upprörande. Och det är också vår uppgift som politiker, som folkets folkvalda, att visa att vi tar de här problemen på allvar. Men det finns en hårfin skillnad mellan att bekräfta den här oron och faktiskt exploatera den. Och där måste vi dra en gräns och ingen är oskyldig till det här. Vi har alla gått den vägen någon gång i våran jakt efter att få bra rubriker kring oss. Men jag tror vi måste höja blicken, tänka långsiktigt och verkligen titta vad som fungerar enligt forskning och beprövad erfarenhet så att vi gör de åtgärder som verkligen är troliga att de fungerar. För det finns en hel del förslag som kanske låter braskande och bra, men när man skrapar lite på ytan så kanske de inte är bra. Det kanske finns gott stöd i forskningen från andra exempel där man har provat olika saker. Jag tänker till exempel en sån sak som visitationszoner som är utom de allra flesta som en kontraproduktiv åtgärd. Det vore väldigt olyckligt om man la en massa tid på att genomföra sånt som inte kommer att hjälpa och kanske till och med är kontraproduktivt. Vi har kommit till ett läge som är så pass allvarligt att vi måste göra allting rätt nu. Och även om vi gör allting rätt så måste alla vara medvetna om att det kommer att ta tid att vända situationen. Vi pratar om 10-15 år i de allra värsta fall. Men det går att vända. Det finns goda exempel på. Jag tänker Gårdsten till exempel utanför Göteborg som har blivit bortplockade från NOAs lista på särskilt utsatta områden. Tänker på Klockaretorpet i Norrköping där man har väldigt mycket med engagemang och ledarskap faktiskt tagit sig ur en besvärlig situation. Men sen handlar det också om den stora kontexten som både Handelskammaren här och Centerpartiet har jobbat med också. När det gäller trösklarna till arbetsmarknaden. Vi vet att social och ekonomisk exkludering är en grogrund där kriminaliteten frodas.
Boel, jag gissar att arbetet mot brottslighet och för att främja trygghet och säkerhet att det är mer pragmatiskt betonat på lokal nivå. Men hur skulle du säga att de här åsikterna som går isär kan översättas till din situation i Södertälje? Eller är det som så att du tycker att rikspolitiken borde eller kan kanske ha någonting att lära ifrån hur man till exempel jobbar i Södertälje?
Ja, men jag tycker man kan lära av hur vi jobbar naturligtvis och vilka erfarenheter vi har och vilken enorm vikt den stora resursen poliser som vi har fått i Södertälje har haft. Dels vårt samarbete naturligtvis men också kunna vara närvarande som Johan säger. Jag håller ju med om, det är klart det behövs fler poliser, det tycker ju alla partier också, det vet vi alla om. Och att det behövs stränga straff och stränga, men man måste också tänka i andra änden på dels de förebyggande insatserna, det pratar vi mycket om, men också de lagändringar som krävs för att inte vi varje dag ska göra det lätt för den organiserade brottsligheten att tvätta sina pengar till exempel. Sverige tog bort den kommunala förköpsrätten och tog bort folkbokföringsbrottet. Alltså nu har man infört äntligen bokföringsbrottet igen som gör det svårare i alla fall för den organiserade brottsligheten att använda sig av lägenheter och sånt där för att tjäna pengar. Men kommunal förköpsrätt av mark togs bort vilket har gjort att det är enorm penningtvätt i fastighetsbranschen. Jag får föreläsa för fastighetsägare hela tiden så det är nytt för många också. Oj, kan vi inte sälja till vem som helst? Så det tycker jag vore en bra idé. Och sen tycker jag att en folk- och bostadsräkning är helt nödvändig då vi vet inte riktigt var människor bor idag. Så att, och det hoppas jag att vårt parti på något sätt ändå ska genomföra hur man än gör det. Och det finns också arbetskraftsinvandringslagen som är den mest liberala i hela världen. Det finns inga undantag i den till Sverige vilket utnyttjas kraftfullt också. Migrationen används för att tjäna pengar av den grova organiserade brottsligheten på ett organiserat sätt. Man säljer arbetstillstånd så kommer man hit. Och så hamnar man i svarta hyresrätter. Du får jobba svart eller betala för att ha ditt arbetstillstånd och kunna stanna kvar. Det finns många lagstiftningar som man på nationell nivå behöver ta tag i för att göra det svårare för den organiserade brottsligheten att tjäna sina pengar.
När det kommer till näringslivets roll, och nu vänder jag mig egentligen till alla er. För vi i näringslivet, vi brottas ju med att vi vill, och våra företag, det har vi inte sett minst här med Volvo Cars, vill ju vara en del av lösningen. Men samtidigt så måste vi ställa tuffa krav på politiken. Våldsmonopolet, rättsstaten, det är ju så att säga grundläggande uppgifter. Men hur ser ni på näringslivets roll? Vad kan och vad ska näringslivets roll vara?
Ja, jag tror att näringslivet är både ett mål och ett medel för tryggheten, för att då upprätta den och hålla den i Sverige. Vi vet vad en näringsidkare på en plats som är på gränsen till att vara brottsutsatt kan göra genom att dra ett flöde till sig av vanligt folk, i brist på bättre ord, som skapar en trygghet. Om den här personen, tack vare att den känner sig alltför otrygg, väljer att lägga ner sin verksamhet eller flytta den verksamheten, då ökar otryggheten ytterligare på det området. Så näringslivet är oerhört centralt. Och jag blir jätteglad för det här partnersamarbetet som ni berättar om idag. Jag tror att det kommer att vara väldigt, väldigt viktigt det här. Faktum är att jag ska ge Södertälje lite beröm också. Jag var där för några år sedan och fick reda på hur det går till vid en utsättning på fredagarna. Där är inte bara polisen och fältarna från socialtjänsten med, utan även de privata centrumvakterna. Och jag tror att det var en viktig faktor till att Södertälje faktiskt har kommit en bit på väg med att lösa era problem. Där att det är väldigt mycket lättare för den här vakten som är där på en fredagkväll om den personen har varit med på utsättningen och fått information från polisen om vad som kan förväntas hända. Om de är ombedda att hålla utkik efter en grön bil och ser en grön bil, så kan de ringa till den personen som har berättat det för dem. I annat fall då ska man börja med att ringa till polisens växel och kanske säga någonting sådär. Men bara att man vet vem det är som jobbar och har en etablerad kontakt tror jag är oerhört viktigt och effektiviserar brottsbekämpningen väldigt mycket.
Johan Forsell.
Nej, men jag tror att det finns väldigt mycket som näringslivet kan bidra med. Men jag vill ha möjligen en lite annan ingång i detta. Jag tycker mig nämligen märka väldigt mycket en glidning i samhällsdebatten där helt plötsligt är liksom rättsfrågorna är allas ansvar. Näringslivet ska ta ansvar, kommunerna ska ta ansvar, enskilda medborgare ska ta ansvar. Fine, säger jag. Men låt oss komma ihåg en sak. Statens viktigaste uppgift, det är att skydda medborgarna. Det vill säga det här är framförallt ett statligt ansvar. Det är rättspolitiken är liksom grunden i staten. Oavsett vilket parti det är som styr för tillfället. Så det tycker jag är viktigt att komma ihåg. Ytterst är det liksom nationellt ansvar här. Snarare än att säga att nu ska liksom alla andra kompensera för det nationella misslyckandet. Sen med det sagt, det är klart att man kan göra mycket både på lokal nivå och jag vill gärna liksom ge en komplimang. Jag tycker att man i Södertälje under Boels ledning har liksom arbetat framgångsrikt med det här. Och det finns andra sådana exempel från andra delar av landet också av olika politisk färg. Så. Näringslivet kan göra mycket, till exempel det här partnerskapsprogrammet. Jag tänker också ett ansvar för att vissa miljöer, vi vet ju att kriminella ofta dras dit, det är mörkt, det liksom är sunkigt, eftersatt. Den typen av miljöer kan man bidra med och engagera sig i. I steg 2 naturligtvis kopplingen till arbetsmarknaden, se till att fler kan få in en fot där även om man inte har det perfekta CV:t, allt detta. Men ansvaret för rättspolitiken och för att kriminella blir lagförda, det är och förblir ett nationellt ansvar.
Ett stort tack till er. Det är bara någon månad kvar till valet och här på Stockholms Handelskammare så kommer vi givetvis att bevaka valet generellt men specifikt också kopplat till trygghets- och säkerhetsfrågorna. Det är tyvärr för första gången i vår 120-åriga historia en av våra absolut mest prioriterade frågor. En varm applåd till er och tack för att ni kom. Ni kan ta. För vi ska faktiskt gå över till att knyta ihop säcken. Det har varit otroligt inspirerande och informativt de här samtalen och diskussionerna som vi har haft. I'm switching back over to English and what I was just saying was that it's been amazing, truly inspiring. Thought-provoking at times, as it should be. But I would like now to invite back up Jack, Paul, Robert, Rick, Eric, Matt and Ben. You have been listening in to the Swedish experts, the agency representatives, the police, and also the Swedish politicians. If you don't mind giving us just your brief concluding remarks, what are the takeaways from today's discussions, you think, and also when you listen in to our Swedish friends here?
I would start with one thing. Can you hear me? I would start with one thing in particular. I mean, you can hear from my colleagues that we've had experiences that led us to improve our delivery of public services, and it can only happen in collaboration with others, other sectors of the economy and with private industry. But more importantly, there must be an urgency to make that happen. There's got to be the impetus to make people energized to commit to change, and to commit to change in a positive way. But it doesn't just happen because one person is held accountable. It's not just the police. It's not just business. It's not just changing behaviors of gang members. It's that system. But there must be urgency behind it.
Anyone would like to add to this?
No? Good.
As a career prosecutor, I was a prosecutor for 27 years in the States. It was just an honor, one, to be here, and secondly, to provide you options. I think all of us gave you an opinion as to how we did things, do things, especially on mine on an organized crime end, on the money laundering end, an interpretation, right, of statutes that you have and a suggestion. The beauty of this is we basically get to show you these suggestions, give you recommendations, and then put the ball in all of your court and let you figure out the path that you take. And that's a great thing, and it's been an honor to be here and to talk to all of you.
So today was just the opening salvo of 3 days of presentations that we're going to be given. Tomorrow we're meeting with our brethren, the police commanders, and we're going to drill down on a lot of the things that we spoke about today in much greater detail and see how we can make up for the last 2 years of lost momentum, because I think the pandemic hurt us in ways to include public safety for everybody. So it's slowed up the progress here, but I think we can pick up the momentum on this. What's important because of where we are right now, and it's been emphasized with the P3s, the public-private partnerships, and the anecdotal discussions that I've had today, as well as what we've heard about the successes with NYPD, with their SHIELD program and the Metro SHIELD program. Very, very difficult in today's world with evolving technology and the needs of law enforcement agencies for public safety to be achieved without the public and private partnership. So this has been a very valuable audience for us to talk to, and I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
I'll just add, it's wonderful to see the level of commitment from everyone to working towards solutions together. Public safety is not just the responsibility of law enforcement, it's the whole community coming together. And to have that commitment and support from all parties, I see a very successful trajectory in your future to continuing to improve on the safety of your communities.
Anecdotally and experientially, I think any success, and there has been a fair amount of success in the United States against organized crime, requires a recognition that it's not just prosecutors, it's not just police or law enforcement agents, it also requires judges and the legislature. There are a number of prongs to this. Those are the important prongs. There have to be the laws. The judges have to sentence or impose sentences that are appropriate for the crime. The investigators have to investigate, and the prosecutors have to prosecute. Without any of those four, it's not going to work, or it hasn't worked. It wouldn't have worked with us.
And I guess I'll close from our end to say, oh, no. Oh, good. Okay. Okay.
As I sit here and listening to this, I think when I first went through police training, they talked about the first professional police force was put together by someone named Sir Robert Peel, and he had some principles of policing that he put out. And one of them was, that I've always remembered, was the people of the police and the police of the people. So the police have to represent what the people want. And I think what you've heard today is you've heard an American perspective, you've heard of a Canadian perspective, and whatever solution or whatever options or whatever you put into place, it has to work for your country as well. And so I think what we've done is we've put together some of what we've learned. I'll speak for myself, I don't think we have it perfectly right either. There's always little tweaks that you can do to improve things. And so I think whatever you take from this is to find something that works best for this country.
Thank you. But it's interesting. I just did a radio interview a few minutes ago, and the reporter, the journalist, I don't know if she's still here, she said to me, and I'm not criticizing the interviewer either. She said, so what did the police do right and wrong? I go, this is referring to the riots that took place. I said, why is this about the police? Why is it always about the police? Did the police start the riot? Did the police end the riot? Where are the parents? Where's government? It can't all lie on the police. It really can't. It's a greater society issue. Why in the streets of Chicago or New York are children out at 3 o'clock in the morning and they get shot or they're shooters? Is it the police? The police get the call. The police are the only ones there in government 24 hours a day. And I think that's what you heard from the team up here. And you heard from our elected officials or soon to be elected officials. It's not all on the police. It's a greater society issue. And that's why I think that a group like the Chamber has been extremely provocative to bring this initiative forward and say, it's all of our issue. It's all of our concern. And the one thing we can't do is work in a silo. We cannot work in a silo. I'll be careful what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. We could throw 5 times the size of police, what's the number of police in Sweden? It's 20,000. We can make it 60,000. We can make it 80,000. Unless business, elected officials create the laws, unless the police, unless the social services all step up and collaborate, you're going to be in the same place, if not worse, in 24 months. And you're right. What's happening now in Ukraine is not only going to impact you, you're here, you're a part of Europe, it's going to impact us too. And we have big issues to worry about. More organized crime, more human smuggling, more trafficking. So this is a great start. Let's not end the day thinking how bad things are. We end the day thinking that human beings, for the most part, are really good. Go to the Polish border and take a look at how many people are looking to help other people during the worst of times. There are good human beings. We could just look at the horror, but look at all the people that are coming together and leaving their homes to try to help other people. And the Swedish people have always been there for everybody else. So whatever experience we can provide you, we're here for you. We believe in you. And I know you believe in yourselves. You're a strong people. You really are. So with that said, I'm going to conclude by thanking you, thanking our host, Danielle, Andres. Oh, of course. Sorry? No, I didn't forget his name. Frederick, my good friend Amir, and if I forgot anyone, thank you for hosting us. It's been a wonderful, wonderful trip here. We're not finished yet, and feel free to reach out to us offline. We look forward to working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and big round of applause. So thank you, and I'm so happy we end on a positive note, because this is what we're trying to accomplish. We see the problems, we tackle them, and we create the change we need in order to improve. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.